What's up, gang? Welcome to another episode of Bitcoin Magazine Live. I'm your host, Q, coming to you yet again from my mother's basement, and I'm joined by my co-host, P. How goes it, P?
As always, it goes fucking amazing. Lots going on. Well, less than a lot going on, but I'm excited to talk about it. You caught me dancing at the end there. That intro song always gets me hyped. Just vibing out.
Can I just say there was a moment where I was like trying to do like my like pregame, like, you know, the little jumps, the whoa, whoa. And I was like, wait, now Chris can see this.
Mm-hmm. I see it all.
He sees and hears everything.
My pre-hype thing is just straight dabbing. I just not actually the dabbing, but I do this. Just
no, you can't talk about weed right now. I'm on like a timeout. So this is not a timeout, but a self-imposed hiatus, tolerance break, and boy, does it suck. We got a jam-packed Wednesday for you guys. It's Hump Day, July 20th. We have news and notes, which we'll kick off in just a moment. We'll have a conversation with CK Snarks to discuss the binary outcomes of Bitcoin and whether or not you, me, and everyone else is bullish enough. And then we're going to wrap things up with a really fun segment with BTC Sessions talking about education. So let's dive right into it with everything going on in the world and some news and notes. Our first story, Coin Debt Card is a card you can send Bitcoin to in order to spend like a debit card, USD, to buy groceries and such. Chris, do you have the video up if we want to show that?
Yep, and it's Coin Debit Card. You were right the first time.
My bad. I'm going Ron Burgundy, man. I just read the teleprompter.
Debit. All right, it was sent. So now I'm gonna go back and check and make sure this was paid off. All right. It has been paid. It's got $50 on it. So now I'm gonna go to ShopRite. I'm gonna see if I can spend some Bitcoin.
I feel like he's gonna swipe.
All right, good.
Insert cash or select payment to use PIN pad to complete transaction.
Moment of truth.
Declined.
There we go. Bitcoin for groceries.
I want to make sure I'm understanding this. He essentially has sent Sats Bitcoin to this card, and the card itself now is converted it directly to USD, or is it still Sats on his card?
Yeah, so I haven't had a chance to really dive into it, but I'm pretty sure, yes, it's the card is acting as an intermediary. So basically you're giving them Sats, they're giving you US dollars on the card at the time of transaction. So in the beginning, when he's like sending Sats and says confirmed, he got $50. So he basically sold Sats to load up the card as a debit card. And then when he goes to the grocery store, it has a 50 USD balance. So it's no longer with the fluctuation in price of Sats. And then he just uses it as a normal debit card.
Interesting.
Yes. So it's a way to live off your Bitcoin if you're on the Get on Zero crew, meaning get on zero fiat and only live on Bitcoin. This is another tool that you can use. I know it's one of the other cards in the market. I believe the Bolt card does the same thing as well. I think the Bolt card is more of, it's like exactly to Q's point, it's leaving the Sats on there and it's a pull request when you're paying it. So this is more of, it's not a pull request. It's when they generate the invoice to do it, you are pulling the Sats off of the card. But this is more of Bitcoin to fiat rails. Still interesting nonetheless. I'm not sure if I would use a product like this, but it's cool. More and more of these products are coming out. It'd be cool even too if it was NFC. So it could just be like a tap pay. It looks like it has the chip on it for plugging into the console, but it'd be cool if it's NFC as well in the future.
I was expecting him to like swipe the card and then instantly like a SWAT team descends on him and is like, "You're using Bitcoin, get the fuck out of here." Glad that didn't happen. Yeah, I agree. I think you're absolutely right, Chris. I think, you know, more and more of these products are coming to market. I think it's a cool trend. You know, as I said before, there's a lot of people who this will be an interesting product for. I think that I will be most excited when there's an option, when you have a card that you can decide if you want it sold into USD at time of transfer, or if, you know, or when you actually make the purchase. That would be a cool thing where there's just a toggle.
Yeah, Pete, I agree. Like if you could have a split balance, like you have some sats and you have some USD and you're like, oh, price is going up, maybe I sell now, or oh, price is going down, I'm just going to use the USD and then convert more into Bitcoin. It'd be cool to flip flop back and forth. Obviously that becomes a tax. This is not financial advice. This is not tax advice. Do not take any of these things as a suggestion. Just it's for your information.
Yeah. Cool trend. All right. What do we got next?
Yeah, so I guess the next one, I know we had a nice Fedimint Spaces last night, or Fedi.btc, or Fedi BTC, led by Obi and a bunch of other people on his crew, had a Spaces last night with P and Bitcoin Magazine, and they were talking about Fedimints and what they are and how they work and how they operate. P, you don't have to go into the nitty-gritty details and all the technical aspects, but if you can just give a highlight of Fedimints for the people that missed the Spaces, that will be on our podcast feed in the next couple of days, so look out for that. Oh, no, Q says no.
Don't worry about it. Don't even trip, dog. We'll talk about that. But Fedimints are a super interesting technology. Odell did a really good job summarizing why they're compelling during the Spaces we had last night, because essentially the most people will use whatever technology is the simplest. And so we have this challenge in Bitcoin in that custodying your own Bitcoin safely and responsibly it creates a barrier for people. And the most people, again, will always do the easiest thing. So Fedimints are very interesting because they strike a balance between, full self-custody and, your Bitcoin or your value being custodied by a third-party entity that you have to trust. So Fedimints basically, and so what we talked about last night is this new company that Obi and a number of other people are launching, Fedi, which basically implements Fedimint, and they're building out a wallet, which is going to have a lot of these features. But there's three main components of the Fedimint technology that are important. So the first is that Fedimint is designed to be used by pre-existing communities where the members in that group already have high levels of trust in each other. So families, friends, villages, community groups, church groups, whatever it is, et cetera, where there's already a level of trust, right? This is superior to some of these distant third-party relationships that we currently have to maintain in our lives, right? Like with your bank or with a Celsius or a 3AC or whoever it is that you're giving your Bitcoin to. So huge step up in terms of having to trust. You're still offloading some of that trust, but you're doing it in an existing trusted group, which already exists in the real world. The second part is that it allows you to break the custody challenge into two different parts. So you basically recognize that within any existing community, there's going to be people that are more capable of guarding the group's Bitcoin than others. And what you do is those more capable, that smaller group, they become sort of what are called guardians, and they do the heavy lifting by hosting the group's wallets and processing all the transactions that need to happen within that community. So then the other group members have a super simple app, which basically allows them to, offload all that work to the group guardians, who are the super trusted members. The third and final part of the Fedimint system is that it involves two other technologies, federations and Chaumian eCash mints. And by using both of those things, you're able to remove any single weak point in the process and also maintain complete privacy for all users. So the thing is, the guardians can't actually see how much value anyone is transacting in or has. They're just signing the transactions. It uses blind signatures, which is another technology. Like so many things, especially in Bitcoin, these are all built on top of tried and true and trusted technologies to aggregate them in this really unique way and create this powerful system. So you add all those things together and you get a system that is inexpensive to use. It's super simple to use. It scales really effectively to potentially billions of users. It protects you against loss of keys. If you're custodying your own Bitcoin personally, then and you lose your keys, you're totally fucked. If you're using a Fedimint, you can basically lose your keys, and the federation, this trusted group of guardians in your community that already exists, that you already trust with things, can then give you back access to your Bitcoin. In the same vein, your funds are accessible if you die, something like that. It's it's fine if you forget your password. It's potentially more theft resistant because, again, there's this larger group of guardians. You're spreading out the custodial risk. The other thing that's really interesting is that there are some interesting regulatory aspects because I won't go into the details, but it basically makes you exempt from a lot of regulations that exist in terms of Bitcoin custody today. because you're using these second party relationships, these trusted guardians. And then also it allows you to still maintain a very high degree of self-sovereignty. So I would highly suggest that if you're interested in this, you go read the article. There's a couple articles by Obinuasu, who was in the Spaces last night, on Bitcoin Magazine. There's one that's Fediment, the evolution of Bitcoin custody. And then there's another one where they are announcing this new company that they've put together and recently received, I think it was $4 million in funding to develop this wallet and create educational resources. But he does a fantastic job of summarizing this stuff. And again, you have like trusted third-party relationships today, like with your bank or with an exchange. Then you have at the other end of the spectrum, you have full self-custody where you're doing multi-sig. And then in the middle, you have this thing, which is Fediments, that offers a really, really compelling balance of those two things and will massively help with Bitcoin adoption. So
it's a step in the right direction, it seems. I know that while some of us may have the privilege to have a longer time horizon to be able to maybe be more speculative with our Bitcoin, some people urgently need a solution to their monetary issues today. And this is hopefully a step in that direction. So I really enjoyed hearing what Udi and his team are, or Obi, Obi and his team are working on, their approach to it and sort of their thoughtfulness to it. I think one thing that really stood out to me that Odell said yesterday was, unfortunately, a lot of people right now are using things that are not safe, not secure, because they're the easiest things to use. And this is supposed to be a direct, I'm just going to say it like this. It's supposed to be a direct competitor. These are not his words. These are mine, to these platforms that do not offer the same privacy and security offerings, but have the ease of use that draw people in. The hope is that this will start to sort of take the place of these less secure, less safe options that are available. Shall we move to the next story?
Let's do it.
So this is a big one. Tanks in China are protecting banks because Bank of China Henan branch declared that people's savings in their branch are now investment products and can't be withdrawn. Not your keys, not your money. Bitcoin literally solves for exactly this. This is a developing story that we actually reported on last week as well, talking about how there was potential for, or banks were freezing accounts and people were unable to access their accounts. China is very clearly, in my opinion, dealing with the fears of a bank run right now. And they're trying to take actions to prevent a bank run. This is to say it's bad is an understatement in the least. My heart goes out to the people who are just caught in the crossfires of this, families who aren't able to put food on their table or afford whatever payments they need to pay. This is tough. And this is yet another reason why we need to separate money from the state. We need to be much more thoughtful about what money is and our individual and familial, our family's relationship with money as well. This, for my American friends who are watching this thinking like this won't happen in the US, this happened in communist China. Something not too dissimilar happened just north of the border, where bank accounts were being frozen because people were told, hey, you said something the government doesn't like. This is a slippery slope, man. I don't give a damn if this happened in China, if this happened in Africa or wherever. Like, I'll say it like this. The fact that I'm afforded a lot of luxuries that the American system provides is not because I took some test or won a lottery to move here. I was born here. I had the great fortune of being born here and benefit from these systems. I could just have easily have been born in China and be dealing with this, or I could have been born in Venezuela and been dealing with their financial crisis down there. So I urge you to not just think of this as this is a China problem only. This is a human problem that people who put their time, effort, and energy to work and make money are now being told that time, effort, and energy was for nothing. I said on Twitter, I was feeling spicy and I'm trying to hold back from like the slur of
darkness in.
I'm just like, yo, well, fuck you, Xi Jinping.
I mean, the worst part is that it's not, they're not actually being told that directly, right? That is exact. I mean, they're being told like, no, everything's chill. Like, don't even trip, dog. Meantime, at major banks, there are tanks preventing bank runs. The funniest part is that, like, of course, it's digital yuan. So it's not even, there isn't even paper to be like extracted from the bank. So it's this like weird thing where they have a show of force to prevent people, I guess, from trying to extract their digital, it's fucking weird. But yeah, I agree. Not your keys, not your fucking coin. Bitcoin fixes this.
Q, it hasn't happened to us Americans, but it happened to Russians. So, like, US has already cut off or sanctioned Russians. China's sanctioned their own people. Canada sanctioned their own people. We're one step away from the US being like, you said this on Twitter. You work for Bitcoin Magazine. You like Bitcoin. Like, you can't use your money in the bank account. So I think to Q's point, we're not too far away from this here in the United States. And that's a scary thing to say. Most people, until it hits home, meaning it affects them, they're just kind of blissfully ignorant. But I think we're not too far off, to be honest. I don't know what would be the catalyst for it. P, go ahead. You had something to say.
I was just going to comment that the idea of nationalized social credit scores are so Orwellian to me. And, they are already extremely prevalent in China. And, we've talked about this before, but the fact that New York, as a separate issue, but related, in order to apply for a concealed carry license, as I understand it, in New York, you have to have something ridiculous, like 3 years of social media history that they can audit. So if you don't have a social media account, like you're never going to get a concealed carry permit. And, separate from what you think about, gun ownership, people should be able to own guns, or what those issues, the fact that they are tying in the existence of a social media account and, whatever it is, 2-3 years of history, forget the exact number, that's fucking terrifying. And I think that I really hope that we don't go further down that rabbit hole as China has done, where, your ability to take on debt, your ability to shop certain places, your ability to participate in things that affect you as an individual are regulated by an app, which is this Orwellian, social credit score. It's bad news bears, man. Bad news bears.
I want to comment on Eddie Beer, your comment about how, like, technically speaking, the law in the US is the same. We have weird protections like FDIC insurance and whatnot that I agree with you, but that should separate us from this system. But to your point, FDIC insurance means absolutely nothing if, for example, let's just say the Federal Reserve really sucks at their job and does something wrong to debase the US dollar, like maybe what they've been doing for the last 15 years. And all of a sudden they say, you know what? Bank of America just collapsed. We can't afford to FDIC insure every single bank account that Bank of America had. Sorry, we're moving on. So there is, like, that is a possibility. Is it going to happen? The probability of that is, in my opinion, less than the probability of what you're seeing transpire in China if you had asked me this question a month ago. But if you had asked me this question a year ago, I'd probably have put the probability of something in Canada happening based on you speaking out against the government and then them shutting down your accounts. I would have put that probability at very low. I would have put it, honestly, a year ago, if you had asked me that question, I would have put that as less likely than the Federal Reserve failing so badly that they actually cannot follow through on FDIC insurance.
Yeah, Q, I want to add to that point.
Please.
I think when you're in a relationship with a bank, going back to Eddie Beer's comment, like, you're in a 2 or 3 multi-sig. And what's that mean? It's you, the bank, and the government. And the other two, the bank and the government, are always not, I don't want to say colluding against you, but, like, you say anything wrong and the government's like, yeah, no, Chris is not allowed to draw his money today. The bank's going to side with the government, not side with you. And I would say in the majority of cases. So, You know, it's you're one tweet away, you're one thing that you say away, you're one video post away from them withholding your money. And exactly to your point, while FDIC insurance may protect you, if the government's like, oh, we're protecting everyone but PQ and Chris, like we could very well be on that end of things in a bank run or whatever.
It doesn't have to be a bank
Pull up
run.
Eddie's comment. Pull up Eddie's comment on the screen, and then P. Sorry, go ahead and talk.
Go ahead.
His next comment.
So, I mean, what I was going to say is it is both worse and better than, it's actually worse than what you just said. There is no 2 or 3 multi-sig, right? If it's a 2 or 3 multi-sig, you can see where your money is. You can verify, where it's been. We're talking about Bitcoin, where that Bitcoin is, even if you can be overruled by 2 of the 3 other parties that are participating. In a bank, the bank is what controls your funds. The government is actually not directly involved. Now, the government has the ability, because as you said, the bank is, the government's bitch. They can basically tell them, hey, stop transactions on this group of people. Stop transactions on this type of business, right? This is really, really common in, anything that is labeled as being under the sphere of, sex workers or pornography. And despite what you may or may not feel about those things, the fact that that the government can basically say, or banks can decide, hey, this category of person, which we're going to sort of paint a very broad brush with, we're going to cancel their credit cards. We're not going to give them loans. We're going to freeze their bank accounts potentially. That's really, really bad. You don't want a bank making those arbitrary decisions on behalf of individuals. So it's so much worse than a 2 or 3 multi-sig. The bank controls your funds. And it's bad news.
Should we move to the next story? I kind of want to address a couple of these comments if we can. I mean, thank you, Eddie Beer, and also I believe it was Steven. I'm sorry, I'm just going to butcher the Alski, pointing out like Alstecki. Thank you. Wow, that was bad.
It's pronounced
FDIC,
Smith.
The FDIC sort of pool of money that they're holding is, surprise, surprise, fractional reserved banking is recreated with FDIC insurance. Like, holy fuck. Guess what else was fractionally reserved, guys? The subprime mortgage bonds that everyone was buying and selling in the early 2000s. We're literally recreating these fucking systems that we agreed sucked, just in different ways. Also, all right, this is what happens to SoberQ. We're sidetracking a little bit because I do want to talk about the Mahler stuff. And if CK gets cut 15 minutes, I'm sorry, CK. So there was a gentleman that was the CEO of AIG FP at the time of the 2008 financial crisis. His name was, I believe, his initials were JC, so we're going to leave it at JC. This man had no financial background. He, I believe, had a degree in construction from like a very small college in New York City, not discounting small colleges. I'm just saying, like, you have no financial background or understanding. He was a really good yes man, though, and knew some members of the board at AIG and was appointed as their CEO, I believe in 2003, 2004. And as someone with no financial wherewithal, all he was told was, hey, continue to grow the business. These are the things that we have that make us money, and just keep making more of it. He, on a couple of occasions, was told by one of his analysts out in Connecticut that, hey, these subprime mortgage bonds that we're buying, they look really bad and we should probably stop. And his response to his analyst was to scream at him, yell at him, berate him, and tell him he was stupid and don't ever say this to anyone else. And it took them about a little more than a year for them to finally stop buying the long side of these subprime mortgage bonds. It is so eerily similar to me that Jerome Powell, who has no financial experience, who is a lawyer by trade, who only got involved in the government because his former boss tapped him and brought him in. He has been a yes man his whole career. It literally, we have recreated that sort of almost not fall guy, but just a person who is not meant to be in charge. We've put him in charge because the powers that get to decide that just simply want someone who's going to do and adhere to whatever they say, which is a very, very dangerous thing. We have, in essence, recreated, I think, a lot of the issues that I want to say the private sector, but it was the public sector technically, but not the government sector. These were issues that companies created that everyone unfortunately had to deal with. We took those issues and now the government is the one doing it. I'm so floored. I just wanted to share that because it's been something that's been eating at me. My dad had to sit through that lecture at dinner last night. And yeah, so now you guys all had to sit through that lecture too.
Yeah, I think I'm going to touch on one last point. FDIC insurance, I didn't even know it's fractionally reserved, which is even worse. But let's be honest, if the event that there was not enough money there, what are they going to do? They're going to print more money. So like, it's just more super inflationary. Like if there's a bank run and they're actually, using the insurance to protect it, money printer go burr, Jerome Powell is just going to start printing that money, send it to all the banks so people can withdraw their money. But then they're going to do, I don't know, it would be a banking collapse and your money becomes more and more worthless. Bitcoin protects you against debasement of currency. That's what we're trying to do. And with the amount of debt that we have, they have to print more money. It's not if, it's when. You guys want to hit the next story?
Let's do it. If you missed it, Jack Mallers, founder and CEO of Strike, was speaking to Bloomberg Crypto. And he had some very powerful words to say about proof of work versus proof of stake. We're going to run this clip in just a moment, but I just want to point out, man, he has no fear in calling bullshit. And I think a lot more of us need to do exactly that. Call bullshit for what it is. Roll the tape.
Fact that non-believers say it has no intrinsic value is that it uses so much energy to mine. And I actually know your take on this already, so maybe we don't get into it. But one of the things we talk about on our crypto show a lot is proof of work versus proof of stake. We have people come on like Joe Lubin who really defend the idea of proof of stake and saying that it's going to be even more secure. Yeah. I know he does. But what's your take? I mean, Ether is a big challenger.
That's the SEC. No, it's not. So first of all, using energy is not a bad thing, Matt. Like engineering and the use of energy is implied in like the growth of humanity. You know what else uses a lot of energy? An airplane. So I tell you what, you don't like energy. Next time you and the wife go to Europe, you take a kayak, I'll fly United. Next time you want to save and grow your family's wealth, you use the dollar, I'll use Bitcoin. Next time you wash your clothes, you hand scrape your kid's stain out of the white t-shirt, I'll use a washing machine. Like, since when was using energy a bad thing? I mean, come on, like, it's absolutely asinine and ridiculous. And as far as, it's just ridiculous, seriously. It's like no one was like, oh, this airplane uses too much energy.
But we're
it's
trying
like,
to use
I
less.
want to travel without
when
dying.
Greta comes here, she takes a sailboat. So
yeah,
the idea
did she get like deathly sick or something?
She was not a good experience
Poor
for her.
girl, poor girl.
But a small carbon footprint.
No.
You must care. The kids care about their carbon footprint.
And even the carbon footprint, I mean, it like incentivize. It's the best use of energy. You know, like what an airplane can't do, or your washing machine, like make use of excess energy of a waterfall. So it helps stabilize the grid. Like guys flying airplanes aren't stabilizing the grid. So it's just such an asinine, ridiculous, uninformed, uneducated opinion.
Those are the kind of questions I ask.
Sorry. No, proof of stake, like, first of all, if you want an asset to have a commodity premium, which, you know, this room knows what that is, creating money can't be free. Like, guys, what are we talking about? Like, the fact that if a lot of people want to create Bitcoin, it becomes more difficult is why the thing works. Have you lost your mind? Creating money cannot be free. And so, like, what do you mean it's just a stake in the network? So someone like BlackRock just buys stakes in the network? It's absolutely ridiculous. And then you also have to account for things like the laws of physics, which proof of work does. I mean, I think what Michael Saylor calls Bitcoin property and everything else not. I'm not going to comment on what the SEC should do or anything, but I think the real direct messaging there is your relationship with Bitcoin is not a liability. Okay? Your relationship with Bitcoin is not a proxy to some foundation, some team, some corporate structure, some development decision. In fact, the founder of Bitcoin, he, she, or they might be fucking dead. And it's working really well, Matt. That's what Sailor means when it's a property. There's no liability relationship. Like stable coins, there's a liability there. It doesn't mean stable coins are bad. Matt, I own a security. It's called strike stock. Securities aren't bad. Building liability relationships, like Tesla stock's not bad, but there's a liability there with Elon and the company and their roadmap and their cash balance, right? And so like proof of stake, your relationship with that asset's a liability. A stable coin, your relationship with that's a liability. In theory, what you want is a monetary asset where there are no liability relationships. That's the whole point of the thing. That's what proof of work solved that. It was like an amazing innovation. Proof of stake, if proof of work is like, we finally got an airplane to fly. This is a quote of a friend of mine. Proof of stake is like, we know how to make it cheaper, faster, and less carbon efficient just by not flying. It's like, well, like that's not like a competitor. That's just a totally different product. So sorry, I got a little animated. That's
good. But we're on internationally broadcast television.
Sorry.
Let's watch the language.
I fucking love Jack.
Yeah.
I mean, I love the case he makes about like, you think it uses too much energy? Like, all right, then stop using your washing machine. Stop using your dishwasher. Stop using like all of the actual things that use energy, because we as a society have begun to shift around this idea that energy consumption and its use is inherently bad, rather than recognizing what it actually contributes to society. Let's break it down first principles a little bit. You have to invest something to grow. This is across the spectrum of life. You want to become a better writer, you have to invest time in writing to become a better writer. You want to make more money, you have to invest some aspect of money or time to then make more money. You want to grow your capabilities, you have to invest your time to make more fucking capabilities. Like, it is a very clear, I think, cause and effect, and we've lost this idea that we have to put in some work to get the desired outcomes, because too many people, quite frankly, have just been handed their desired outcomes. And I've reached a point where I'm fucking sick of it. I'm sick of these spoiled brats who have never had to fight a day in their lives, who've never seen anything else other than a developed world dictating to everyone else how everyone needs to live based on, well, this is how it works for me, so it should work for you like that. Fuck you. Get out of your goddamn bubble and grow up.
But it's so much worse than that, right? It's so hypocritical. It's basically like this thing that I don't really know very much about, but I've been told that I'm supposed to hate, that thing being Bitcoin. I hate that, but I don't want to be asked like, well, the fact that I use an Xbox, or that, as you said, I wash my clothes in a washing machine, or I fly in a fucking airplane. It's just, it's such a fallacious argument that it is infuriating. I completely agree. Like, get fucked. Come on.
That said, I don't drive a car. I bike everywhere. But that's my
but you do wash your
choice.
clothes. You're in an air-conditioned space or a heated space. Like,
totally. No. I get that. But it's like everyone, especially in this country, the United States of America, should have the freedom to make the choice of what they do. Like, I had this conversation with you guys. One of my biggest sort of battles I will fight to the end of the day, to the day I die, will be water equality. The fact that there is a population, even however small it may be, the fact that people are just born without the same access to water that I have been granted for nothing more than just sheer luck and chance, is a fight that I will always fight. I live in Los Angeles. We have constantly been in droughts and have water shortages regularly. I maximum will take one shower a day. That's my choice. I'm not saying everyone. Fuck you, ZK. Like, that's just my choice. And I'm not saying everyone should do that. But this idea has now circulated that if you make one decision that you yourself thinks is the right decision, everyone else must now make this right decision without calculating what's in their best interest. What are they actually capable of doing? Sri Lanka is the perfect fucking example where you had all these IMF assholes showing up in their private jets, telling everyone in that country, hey, do this, do this, do that, do this, do that. Don't do this, don't do that, don't do this. And then we'll give you the loans that you're asking for so your country could prosper. And then they get back on their private jets, go back to their countries that have a lower ESG rating than Sri Lanka. It's just pure hypocrisy in clown world.
Completely agree. On that note, let's go to commercial break. We'll bring CK in and we'll talk about how none of us are bullish enough. Let's do it. Roll the tape.
You are listening to Bitcoin Magazine. Listening to Bitcoin Magazine. Number one Bitcoin Magazine. You are listening to Bitcoin Magazine. Listening to Bitcoin Magazine. Number one Bitcoin Magazine. Samba.
Oh, I'm muted. Welcome back, everyone. Thank you for sticking through those commercial breaks. And we are joined by none other than CK Snarks, as you may know him on Twitter. We know him. Christian, how goes it, CK?
What's up?
Also,
How's my audio?
better than last time we saw you. We should probably actually give him a proper introduction, I guess, because technically speaking, this is our boss. This is our fearless leader. He is the man in charge of all things Bitcoin Magazine. Did that cover the gist of everything you do and then some?
Yeah, just making things happy, trying to stay bullish. So,
Well, as you try to stay bullish, you have pretty much shamed all of us. And we're just going to start right there because you've been on a little bit of a rant for the last few weeks on Twitter, trying to call out just Bitcoiners in general, saying they're not bullish enough. Like, what do you mean by that?
I guess, how do you feel about 100K? Is that a lot of money for Bitcoin? How do you
No.
feel about $1 million for Bitcoin?
Those are rookie numbers.
I mean, I agree.
Better, but
It's just
not
I
good
feel
enough.
like what Bitcoiners talk about, like, they're like, what's my bullish scenario? And they're like, $3 million Bitcoin. I'm like, guys, like, come on. Like, you guys are really fucking bearish. I feel like this idea of like infinity divided by 21 million, like Bitcoiners kind of like beat their chest about it, but they haven't like thought about it enough. Like, what does that actually mean? And then like, if you've like then thought about what that actually means, like how you need to behave in order to see that future. Because, I think, obviously it's one thing is like being able to see the correct future. And then it's like how to position yourself for that. That's the other part. So, I mean, that's how I'd like high level frame it, like why it's important to be bullish enough, be the appropriate amount of bullishness, because otherwise you might fuck up.
So I want to get your sense on this because I think you're right in saying this idea that, like 100K, 1 million, 3 million, like that's not bullish enough. But is just the sheer fact that there is still this conversation around Bitcoin will be worth X number of dollars, fiat, of this fiat relationship, is that not the most bearish sentiment out there versus something like saying, I want one Bitcoin to be able to afford me a house, 2 cars, this, like just a laundry list of things. And then changing the equation to say, I don't necessarily need it to be worth this much in fiat. But I need it to have this much buying power for these necessities. Would that be a more bullish conversation in your opinion?
I mean, yeah, I think buying power is like the more accurate way to think about Bitcoin long term. But I mean, I'm not thinking about buying power of Bitcoins. I'm thinking about buying power of Sats. So again, like if we reprice the world in Sats, and then like repricing the world in Sats and then staying at this current baseline is, in my opinion, already really fucking bearish. Like, isn't the whole point of Bitcoin is that it's like a fundamental, massive upgrade on how we communicate and measure and store and transact and share value amongst each other? Like it, like theoretically, like fiat has been holding us back. And Bitcoin can actually enable even more innovation, even more wealth, even more prosperity. So just like calculating where we're at right now, and then trying to come up with some, what kind of buying power will a repriced world in Sats give you? Like, one, I think that's going to blow people's socks off, but two, that's still bearish because that's not taking into account the upgrade to society that is Bitcoin, the upgrade to the world that is Bitcoin.
So what does hyper Bitcoinization mean to you?
I mean, I think it's simple. It's repricing the world in Sats. So everything like Bitcoin is a value communication protocol. So we need to use it to value and communicate that value. So when every aspect of the world is settling value, either denominated in Bitcoin or settled directly on the Bitcoin blockchain or some derivative of the Bitcoin blockchain, like that's hyper Bitcoinization to me. And then again, like there's a conversation about like, what's the price of Sats today? What's the buying power of Sats in the future? And then like what, can you do? Is it humanly possible for your brain to project out accurately what the future will look like, given Bitcoin as our global money? And I just think that, one, we can't. It's impossible to. Like, I'll stand by this. Like, hey, Nikola Tesla was pretty famous for a lot of things, but I would say like probably the thing that he was probably most famous about is he could actually kind of start to project, what electricity will allow us to do. Like he was on the right track. Like he was in many ways, almost bullish enough. So, I don't think any of us are visionaries or savants like Tesla or Leibniz or freaking Benjamin Franklin or Newton or any of these people who, kind of had the vision when there was no groundwork there. So I think, we're still extremely early. We're in the monetization process. Like we haven't even gotten to that point where Bitcoin is the unit of account. And then once Bitcoin's the unit of account, that's when the journey starts. Like that's when the real strides in innovation start happening, because we're not being weighed down by fiat. So I question, like, is there a human being alive that's bullish enough? And then if even your wildest dreams of bullishness are bearish, like, okay, how do you adjust your behavior to try to not fuck this thing up? Because again, if you're not bullish enough, odds are is you sell your Bitcoin too early, or you don't position yourself correctly. Like we can get into the specific scenarios, but I mean, I guess what's y'all's take on that? Like, again, I'm just trying to understand what's happening and again, position myself, right? That's the whole point of Bitcoiners is get Sats, pass them down and reap the benefits of Bitcoin's hyper monetization event.
I completely agree with you. I mean, I think it is very difficult to be bullish enough on this asset, even as Bitcoiners. I think that I also am selfishly, I'm like, yeah, let's keep the price low so that I can acquire more of them and the people I care about. And, people that we're trying to reach with Bitcoin Magazine and the conference and everything that we're doing can have a better chance to get in on this. But yeah, I mean, I think that Bitcoin is definitely going to become the store of value for the entire world. And I think that's going to happen within our lifetimes, maybe shortly after, but the ride up, it's just the risk reward profile on Bitcoin is so asymmetric. It's astounding to me that more people are not as bullish as you are, CK. As you like to say, 37 sats will be generational wealth.
I mean, well, like let's just think about this in terms of 37 sats. That's the block reward in I think 97 years. I thought it was 100 years when I picked it, but it actually wasn't. So it was kind of a fucked up mistake on my part. But 97 years from now, 37 sats will be the block reward. So if Bitcoin works, that means a significant amount of the world's energy is going to be used on a daily basis, on a 10-minute per block basis, in order to get those 37 sats. So if Bitcoin works, odds are 37 sats are worth it versus they're not worth it. So what does that mean? Let's try to, if Bitcoin works, what the fuck is this all gonna, how is this gonna look like? And then again, let's zoom into okay, what can you even predict what the world's going to look like in 97 years, right? Okay, let's go backwards 97 years. That's pre-World War II. Do you think anyone then could have predicted what the hell we'd be doing now? Hell no. They're all way off. 100% of all of them are 100% off. So I think there's a higher likeliness of 37 sats being generational wealth than not. So that's my calculation there.
So I want to address one of the questions that came from LinkedIn really quickly. Not a dumb question. You're just learning, man. So a sat is short for Satoshi. It's the smaller increment of Bitcoin. There are 100 million Satoshis in every Bitcoin. It is essentially all of the decimal places out. So that is what we mean when we say sats. And if there are other questions in that vein, things that you guys don't understand what we are saying, please feel free to write a comment about it, and we will do our best to address these as we continue this conversation. You guys are just going to call me a bear. I don't give a shit. I've said this countless times, and I really do believe this. We unfortunately will not see the dollar disappear in our lifetime. What it will be used for and how it will be used may drastically shift. The opportunities to use Bitcoin, I do believe, will continue to evolve, and there will be greater opportunities than what we have today. Maybe I'm still stuck in it.
Completely disagree, but
fair.
I mean, I guess hey, how much of our telecommunication is done via phone line versus done over the internet now?
I would say almost 100% is done via the internet.
And that happened without telephone cables killing themselves. You're saying that the dollar is going to survive. We're never going to, in our lifetimes, go beyond it. Bitcoin is an upgrade onto the dollar, onto that monetary system, right? And on top of that, the dollar is actually killing itself. It is in the process of killing itself. So to me, it is just absolutely asinine to say something in our lifetime, the dollar is going to continue to be relevant against the most perfect monetary system that has ever been created. It's absolutely just asinine. It's absolutely bearish. It's so bearish. It's hey, we're still going to just use the fucking Pony Express, even though we have phone lines now. You know why? Because the government. Shut the fuck up. Shut the fuck up.
Yeah, that's right.
Sorry.
That's right.
Everyone is spicy today.
It's just it's just how do you call yourself a Bitcoiner and have that opinion? It's just insane to me.
You are
But with that being said, I do think Bitcoin
quote.
is. I would say that Bitcoin is binary, so you should prepare for a everything or zero scenario.
Okay, we will unpack that, but you are misrepresenting my quote. I am not saying that we are going to only be using the dollar and we're going to be stuck on the dollar. What I genuinely believe is going to happen is there will be some form of a return to a dollar backed by some form of sound money. And I do believe Bitcoin can and will take that role. I don't believe that every single country in the world is going to transact on Bitcoin, unfortunately, not while I am alive. I do believe in the future
Is there a country that doesn't have a website?
What's up?
Is there a country that doesn't have a website?
Yes.
Which one?
The island nation of Q.
I'm pretty like, isn't CAR like Central African Republic one of the least industrialized and advanced countries in the world?
Every country has got a
They
website.
even have a fucking. It's like, bro, like this is the bearishness that I'm trying to address here, guys. It's like Bitcoin is a fundamental step change up. It's like, hey, we have missiles, but hey, you know what? We're still going to use bow and arrows. It's like, no, we're not. Like, you're good. Have fun staying poor. Like, have fun becoming completely irrelevant in the world. It's like, how long did it take, like, a communist system that had a top-down economic model compared to, I mean, you could argue that we live in a state communist system today that has a free market-ish model. Like, those things right next to each other. It didn't take very long for capitalism to win. Like, again, when you have two systems that compete next to each other, the system that is inferior technologically dies. So, like, that is what is going to happen to fiat currency. Again, and that's what's going to happen to gold too. I'm not saying that it's just fiat, it's just governments. I'm saying it's like gold, houses, ETFs. It's like literally every single way that you could have communicated and stored value is getting disrupted.
Okay.
100% of it.
We will unpack the binary outcome, but I want you to defend your claims right now, because what you are essentially saying is like, there's no value in the future of your home. So what does that really mean? How do you think we get to a point where all of the value in the world is only in Bitcoin? Because let me tell you something, it is going to be a lot more painful than I think you are giving it credit for. And pain brings out parts of people, parts of governments that we may not have ever seen before. This is not just going to be oh, you know what? That's a better technology. Let's just go there. There's going to be fighting. There's going to be legitimate fighting, and people are going to lose a lot. And when people lose a lot, they will fucking fight back. So how do you think we get there?
I agree. I mean, I think that Bitcoiners need the appropriate level of bullishness, so that way they can position themselves appropriately for the shitstorm that's about to ensue between here and hyper Bitcoinization. I think there's a really great metaphor that Tina and Joe Carlosari were using on the podcast I dropped with them yesterday. But it's like, if you're on one side of the Grand Canyon and you are looking again across the other side of the Grand Canyon, and that is hyper Bitcoinization, like a lot of Bitcoiners are like, oh, we'll just get over there. But no, there's this whole fucking canyon in between. So like, you need to be prepared for the journey. You need to get across the canyon. Otherwise, you're going to get absolutely wrecked. And honestly, my position right now is that most Bitcoiners already have enough Bitcoin to be extremely, extremely wealthy in a Bitcoinized world, which will happen pretty soon. Two is that getting across the finish line is going to be a lot harder than you think. And honestly, I think that like there's a top in how much hardcore Bitcoiners at this time have. Like, I think a lot of hardcore Bitcoiners think that they're going to have more Bitcoin in the future. They're going to keep accumulating Bitcoin at low prices. I honestly think that maybe some Bitcoiners double or triple their stack in the next few years. And then by the time we get to 2030, they've lost a lot of it, right? Either through theft, death, bribery, extortion, having to leave a country, loss of keys. Like, I'm serious. Like, there's like, you name it. There's so many ways to lose those Bitcoin. And I really do think that there's going to be a lot of like hardcore Bitcoiners who have they literally have topped in their sat count because they're not ready. So, I mean, honestly, you already have enough sats. You should be focusing all your effort on just getting that shit across the finish line.
Okay. You have not yet answered my question, though, so I'm going to ask it again. What are the steps that you think are going to happen to get to that point? Like, where are the pain points that are going to happen that we have to mentally start preparing for? If you're telling us that there's going to be no value in the future of your homes, where are people going to be living?
Well, so that's a straw man. I'm not saying that there's going to be no value in the future of home, but maybe we will stop arcanely using houses to store value. These assets that, okay, maybe the real estate itself is not being built up more of, but the actual asset itself is depreciating. Like it's this house, I just moved into a brand new house. Like since I've moved in, it's only gotten damaged, right? It's only gotten damaged. So
Sounds like
the
a
actual
personal
house
problem.
itself is a no, I'm just saying it's a reality. It's a liability.
But
So I mean, the house itself is a liability. So why is it being used to store value? And how is it going to compete against something that is a much more advanced store of value that has no liability attached to it? So I'm not saying that like your house is not going to be stored value, but maybe if it's not going to be is going to be valueless. I'm sure your house will be very valuable, especially if it's has a great location, or if it's in the right neighborhood, or if it's close to where you want your family, or if it's the construction and build that you think is perfect for you. But using homes as a store of value, I think, is being disrupted. Absolutely. Using paintings as a store of value beyond your sentimental value for that art, like I think it's going to be disrupted significantly. Maybe there's a fringe group that does it, but it's just not going to be a mainstream way to store value. Just like, again, the Pony Express is not a mainstream way to send messages. Like maybe it still exists, like maybe it's still relevant to some people, but like it's just not going to be mainstream. And again, like everyone needs a home to live in, but I think that a lot more people are going to have a home to live in when BlackRock isn't funneling fucking ETF value into every home in America and pumping up the prices indiscriminately. Like I think that the lack of store of value in fiat is actually hurting society, right? Like you think your house being valuable is a good thing for society. It's not. It's a bad thing because now people can't have homes because they're getting priced out of homes. But yet, there's like a double digit amount of New York City apartments that are vacant at all times. It's obscene. And guess what? People are like, why is New York so much more expensive than it ever was before? Well, guess what? Because more apartments in New York are being used as a store of value than ever before. So look, Bitcoin's going to fundamentally upgrade the world in many ways. And part of that is literally sucking out by competition via outcompeting every other store of value on the planet. I did a presentation. It was called How Much Bitcoin Do You Really Need? And one of the slides I took, it was like a rough estimate of the store of value market. I believe that the rough estimate is here, I'm actually going to pull up the slide. But the rough estimate, I think, is $13 quadrillion. I mean, Dylan LeClaire says that it's $6 trillion or quadrillion dollars. But this rough estimate was $13 quadrillion. So let's just assume derivatives, real estate, bonds, currency, stock, gold, silver, altcoins, all of that is divided by 21 million, as Bitcoiners like to LARP about. Okay, well, you're looking at $6.02 per Satoshi, right? Do you consider that you think a sat is going to be $6.02? And again, that is bearish. That's not even treating Bitcoin as an upgrade, as something that's going to create more wealth, right? Did the electricity bring more wealth to your life? Absolutely. The invention of electricity compounded wealth exponentially from where it was before. And it increased everyone's quality of life exponentially from where it was before. So we're dividing the current pre-hyper Bitcoinization market cap of the world, value of the world, by 21 million. And it's $6 in whatever cents per Satoshi. So, I mean, y'all are bears. If this thing works, y'all are fucking bears. This thing's going to go, it's going to blow your socks off. We're going millisatoshi. 37 sats are going to be generational wealth. We're going to have fucking Dyson spheres sucking up energy off the sun. Hopefully we're interplanetary at that point. Maybe we're worrying about bigger problems, which is, how much of the universe we can stuff into 21 million Bitcoin. If it works, we need to get so much more bullish. What's our baseline? It's insane.
I don't think you are properly addressing or thinking through, and he just walked away, so he's not going to hear this. I don't think, CK, you are actually thinking through what has to happen between the current system in our real estate market and this idea that you have that everyone's just going to have a house. And there has to be a lot of steps in between. And I think, quite frankly, the assumption you are drawing is wealthy Bitcoiners just going to start buying up plots of real estate and just giving them out to people. No. And that's so unrealistic. And I think what's more likely to happen.
What is straw man, if I ever heard one?
Let me finish, please. I let you finish. Let me.
Okay, stop throwing straw mans at me. Steel man me, bro. Steel man me.
I do not think you are, quite frankly, thinking through what are the steps to get to the point you are actually claiming we will get to. That is one possible scenario. Another possible scenario that I quite frankly think we're scarily going to have come to fruition is, to your point, BlackRock private equity firms are buying up a lot of real estate. They're just going to be our landlords, or the fucking government will be our landlords. And then all of a sudden there is no value in real estate because it's held in the hands of a few. So I don't understand, quite frankly, how you are getting to this conclusion, what steps you think will happen. That is a lot of pain to get to a point that you are claiming will happen without explaining to me what are the pain points to get there.
The thing is, like, I can't explain these super complicated things on this show that simply, right? Like, one, if I knew all the answers, I wouldn't be on this show, bro. I would be advising some really important people. Maybe they'd be listening to me, maybe they wouldn't be, I don't know. But I don't know all the answers there. But what I can tell you is that, first and foremost, Bitcoin is happening no matter what. Like, Bitcoin's here, Bitcoin is happening. Number two, Bitcoin is actually a solution to a complete clusterfuck that's coming no matter what, right? So the absolute indiscriminate fucking that humanity is about to experience is coming with or without Bitcoin. It's coming because of the centralization, the destruction of the sanctity of a gold-based system, the concentration of power. You could bring up like the invention of nuclear weapons and the inability for anyone to compete past having nuclear. I don't know. Like, there's so many different ways that you can slice and dice how we got to this point of like absolutely fucked as humanity. But guess what? There's this little thing called Bitcoin that got invented, and all of a sudden it changes everything. It absolutely changes everything. And personally, for me, I think like Bitcoin's binary. So I started the conversation or my notes by saying Bitcoin is binary, but the reality is that Bitcoin is a set of incentives. If that incentive structure works and continues to work into perpetuity, most likely, like, Bitcoin outcompetes all other assets and sucks up all and becomes the dominant store of value in the human universe, right? If Bitcoin doesn't like kind of go on this journey to its final destiny, it will kill itself. Like, the altcoiners all talk about like, oh my God, what happens when the block reward goes to zero and there's no one using Bitcoin? Well, guess what? Bitcoin's fucking dead. Like, no one's using it. No one cares about it. And guess what? Like, the block reward went to zero. But that is not really a scenario that's like worth focusing on. Like, pretty much you should acknowledge that scenario. You should be like, what's the percentage chance that happens? You should prepare for effectively Bitcoin zero. But in terms of like thinking about Bitcoin, it doesn't really even make sense to like think about to think about a Bitcoin scenario where it's like where Bitcoin's like this middle ground asset, where Bitcoin is just like, hey, it's working, it's fine. Maybe there's going to be fee issues. Maybe we need to freaking extend the tail emissions. It's like, no, like that's failure. That's absolute failure. It's like either the incentives work, 21 million works, proof of work works, the node network works, or it doesn't. So again, if it does work, okay, figure out what is infinity divided by 21 million. Figure out how many sats you need to get so you can be satisfied. Multiply that by some sort of exponential function to address for your human inability to be bullish enough, and then focus all your energy on getting across the finish line. Like, that's what I'm saying is shit is going to get gnarly, Q. Like, it's not going to be good. Like, demonetization of all this stuff is going to make the world go absolutely haywire, but it's happening no matter what. So like, do you have the bullets and do you have the passports and do you have all the other things that you need? Do you have the multi-sig strategy and the what's it called? the way to pass down your Bitcoin to your heirs if something happens to you? Like, if not, like, are you even preparing enough, right? Like, your inheritance plan, thank you, Chris, is absolutely necessary if you're bullish enough, honestly. And I mean, again, if you have enough Bitcoin today to be enormously wealthy in the future, like, where are you out? Like, where are you setting your priorities? Like, again, it's important to be bullish enough so that way you can adjust how you behave, and you can make sure you get past, the craziness that's coming.
So I'm going to present this question in a different way. We're all familiar with Darwin's theory of evolution. For those who are not, Darwin did not believe evolution was gradual. It happened in each generation. Something would cave. The best trait would then carry on to the next generation, so on and so forth. So my question to you guys is, do you think this shift from our fiat system to Bitcoin will be gradual, or will it be this sharp shift that will just one day we'll wake up and they'll say, we're now on the Bitcoin standard?
Is it me first?
I mean, I'll even share my opinion on this first.
No, wait. I want to hear CK's, and then I'll give you mine, and then I want to hear yours.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I've been ranting a lot, so I'm curious to hear what you guys think. But no, I mean, my mental model for hyper Bitcoinization is 2030. It happens in the next 30 years. Happens first in the energy industry, and that's really the fulcrum for a Bitcoin standard. So I don't know exactly how that plays out, but I do think that the trajectory is sound. So things are escalating very quickly. Bitcoin is becoming more and more relevant, and like, Bitcoin is not even an order of magnitude away from gold to market cap. So like, one more order of magnitude upgrade, and Bitcoin is literally a geopolitically, it's on the geopolitical level of every other fiat currency that is relevant. The dollar, gold, the dollar, euros, the Chinese yuan, etc. So again, like, it's not going to take that much for Bitcoin to be extremely, extremely relevant on a geopolitical scale. And as long as Bitcoin continues to go deeper and deeper into the energy ground, that is the fulcrum of hyper Bitcoinization from there.
Yeah, I think you nailed it. I think that to answer your question specifically, Q, I think that a lot of these things that lead to a hyper Bitcoinized world are already happening, and it is difficult to distinguish like which one is sort of like the breaking point versus something else, a step on that path. But there are going to be a succession of like major events. We don't know what those are. I would say definitely within our lifetimes that take us down that path. I agree with CK that it's going to probably start in the energy markets, but there's no way to predict it specifically.
So I hate to say it like this, but I actually agree with both of you. I was really hoping to get some pushback here on this one, but it's a combination of the two. I think what CK outlined is very spot on. It will happen industry at a time until eventually we will look back and be like, oh, Bitcoin is everywhere, doing everything and functioning as it was meant to function.
But there's going to be a landslide eventually. Like, there's going to be a point where suddenly everybody, in the same way that contagion works, right? It's going to be contagion to Bitcoin. So just like we saw, Celsius blow up, 3AC blow up, and then you start having these sort of like knockdown effects, and the effect gets greater and greater and greater. We're going to see the same thing, because as soon as a large enough proportion of things are being denominated in Bitcoin, whether explicitly or behind the scenes, everyone's going to be like, oh, fuck, I got to get my shit into Bitcoin. That's the only thing that actually matters. And I don't know when that point's going to be, but it's going to happen slowly. It's going to be, I hate to say this. We use this term way too much. It's going to be gradually and then suddenly.
Yeah, I can agree with that. I mean, this is literally so when Greg Foss says his thing of Bitcoin is a credit default swap on fiat, that's essentially what he is saying. And for those who are less familiar with what a credit default swap really is, think of it like insurance. Insurance on a bond or something that you think will eventually not pan out, and you're paying year over year. What Michael Burry did was buy a credit default swap on a bunch of subprime mortgage loans. What we are doing with Bitcoin is buying a bunch of Bitcoin because we believe the fiat currency system will fail. Michael Burry thought the subprime mortgage market was failing. So every year he would put a few $1 million into this insurance plan because he thought it would collapse and fail. I genuinely believe it is no different. And that is what Foss is trying to explain. And to P and CK's points here, it is exactly that. It will be slowly, this one industry will take it. And then the industry that's just tangentially over will see, hey, wait, that industry is booming. And the difference here is they adopted Bitcoin. How did one industry really take hold? It's because one company led the charge and all of its competitors are like, oh shit, they're using Bitcoin and they're making more money. So it is, to your point, it is slowly and then suddenly, and it will be very suddenly, and people will not, it will be too late by the time everyone realizes it to ape into Bitcoin. But it was too late to buy a credit default swap in summer of 2007 because the housing market already started crashing. The time to buy it was years earlier to get prepared for the inevitable. However, there will be this stretch of time where all of us will sound like the crazy person at the dinner party. It's like, oh, there's the Bitcoin guy. He thinks the world is going to end.
That's right now.
Totally. So I don't appreciate being called a skeptic on Bitcoin, however, CK. So you can go fuck yourself on that one, my friend.
Dude, get less bearish then, man. I don't know what to tell you. Like we're talking, like we are talking about the basics of bullishness, which is that Bitcoin is a fundamental upgrade on the current system. Therefore, it's going to have fundamental increases in our amount of wealth that we have access to. So if you're even comparing it to what we're dealing with, it's like you're in the Stone Age and you're talking about the Industrial Age. It's just like, it's like we're moving into the future. Like you can't even compare. And that's why, again, I'm telling Bitcoiners, one, you need to be bullish enough so that way you can prepare yourself for the shit show that we are about to embark on. And then two, like, how much Bitcoin do you actually need? Like, should you be focusing all your energy on stacking sats? I don't know. So, I mean, I'm all about stacking sats. I stack sats every single week, multiple times a day, even. I stack every dip, but I'm also really focused on cash flow. I'm also really focused on security. I'm also really focused on my inheritance plan. And honestly, I need to be doing more. I need to be doing a lot more. And honestly, I could probably be focusing a lot more on that stuff because I probably already have enough stats. And honestly, most of you do too. If Bitcoin works, you probably already do. So, I mean, I'm not saying to keep stacking, but focus on keeping it.
Yeah, to that point, one thing that I think is important is, as bullish as we are, this is it is a marathon. And so you need to be managing, in my opinion, you need to be managing your cash flow effectively. So, for people like, if you go all in on Bitcoin and then the Bitcoin price drops as it has, you need to have a plan in place so that you are able to sustain your lifestyle, your family, all the stuff that's important. So, plan accordingly. Don't just, to go back to CK's analogy of the Grand Canyon, don't just throw yourself into the abyss and be like, I'm gonna be fine, bro. Plan ahead.
So let's unpack this binary outcome situation. Why don't you, CK, take the time to really explain what it is you mean by this potential binary outcome? And let's start first with the possibility that it doesn't work. And what does that really mean?
Okay, so I think it's really important to think of Bitcoin, at least its end, like potential outcomes is the least likely potential outcome is that Bitcoin is like marginally relevant. Bitcoin's just whatever. It's just another cryptocurrency. It's just another asset. Like that's not going to be the case. And again, a lot of the bear cases on Bitcoin kind of come around that. It's like if Bitcoin's just another cryptocurrency, like I'm looking at its economic model and it's going to fail. And I would say, yes, that is true. If Bitcoin is just another cryptocurrency, it will fail. But guess what? It's not just another cryptocurrency. Bitcoin is the dominant cryptocurrency. Bitcoin is the ultimate store of value. Bitcoin is going to be the numeraire for measuring value, the metric system for measuring value. And on top of that, the way it does that is by having this perfect monetary system and this perfect hard cap. And if that hard cap does not work, it will not be competitive against the other things. There's other things that will outcompete it. So we need Bitcoin to be the perfect money, and we need the incentives to work for Bitcoin to work as it is. And if Bitcoin gets forked, if something changes to the monetary policy of the system, it's no longer Bitcoin. And that experiment has failed, and we'll be on to the next one. So I just don't see a world where Bitcoin is just this whatever average currency. I really only see hyper Bitcoinization or failure. So I think Bitcoiners should prepare for those two situations. One, if it's hyper Bitcoinization, like get enough Bitcoin to be extremely wealthy in that situation, and make sure that you're taking care of all the other things that could kill you, steal your wealth between now and then. And then if Bitcoin goes to zero, well, you should have other shit. Like maybe have some gold, maybe have some bullets. Maybe it's worth it to buy a house as a hedge. I don't know. Like, again, I just think that this idea of like only having Bitcoin and then not worrying about all the other things that could mess up your stack, I just think that it's a very fragile, very, very fragile situation. And people are putting themselves, it's even worse. They're putting in themselves in that I have only Bitcoin and now I'm going leverage long on that too. And I'm super bullish too, but guess what? Like the sats I have are better than the sats I could have had because I fucked it up. So I'd just rather have less sats than no sats at all. So it really is, I think, having a very, very conservative strategy to get across the finish line is absolutely necessary because Bitcoin's asymmetric. Like your single sat that you can buy literally millions of for hundreds of dollars today, like it's going to be worth over $6 per sat in today's buying power. Like that's just based on infinity divided by 21 million right now. That's not even accounting for any exponential growth.
So with these binary outcomes, what in your opinion, where does something like a country having a Bitcoin standard, still issuing their own currency, but it's backed by Bitcoin that everyone can see, unlike in the gold standard where they could kind of fudge their numbers a little bit more, where does that fall into this binary outcome scenario in your opinion? Would that be a failure in your mind?
No. I mean, again, like then they're eventually settling value, and all of their risk is going to be, measured against the Bitcoin that someone else could have had. So almost like fiat currency is kind of like whatever Bitcoin the country has plus whatever credit you want to give them. I don't know. Someone said $6 a sat is unrealistic, and I would call them a bear. Just like in a hyper Bitcoinization scenario, I don't think that's unrealistic.
So how much in a hyper Bitcoinized scenario, how much does the buying power of one Bitcoin hold? Or we'll make it simpler. How much can you buy with a quarter of a Bitcoin?
It's like
225 million
like
sats.
It is not humanly possible for me to tell you. I can't be bullish enough. It's not humanly possible for me to accurately tell you I'm not Nikola Tesla. But maybe like let's go back in history and be like, okay, hey Q, like you're a poor farmer. Like when the world is electrified, guess what? You're going to be able to farm 10 times, 100 times, 1,000 times more than your field with only one person. Like that's the level of innovation that we're about to like experience as humanity. So it's like maybe it's even more. I don't know. That's the only way that I can even remotely like try to express like where we're going.
So have it on record. He refused to answer the question that he proposed, by the way.
Jesus.
Wait, P, did I not answer the question?
You did answer the question. He's asking an impossible question.
But I'm just trying to give you, like, I'm saying Bitcoin is a step change improvement on what we were doing before. Electricity was a step change improvement on what we were doing before, right? So like burning frickin' like blubber to having electricity was like, you can't even compare what was possible before and after. So it's like, I'm sorry, I'm living in blubber world right now, trying to tell you what electricity is going to do to the world. Like, I'm sorry.
Blubber world sucks.
Like, I'm just like, I'm just so far behind. Like, I'm not that brilliant, but I am humble enough to tell you that I know that I'm not that brilliant, and that I know that pretty much no one else is either.
I mean, look, to be honest, like to strengthen your argument, you're using exactly the logic that Ford used when he was asked, like, if I asked people what they wanted, they would have said faster horses. So like, I didn't give the people what they wanted. So I do agree with a lot of what you were saying, that we can't even fathom or imagine how far this can go and how far reaching it can and will be
But also, it's like it either does it or it doesn't. That's the only playing field that we're in. So it's like it doesn't even make sense to talk about like an in-between scenario. And then when you're talking about the max success scenario, are you bullish enough? And I don't think you are. I don't think anyone is. I don't think it's impossible to be bullish enough.
I think it's important, though, to establish what are the sort of outlier events. And that by outlier events, I genuinely mean either it works or it doesn't. Because right now where we live, it's just sort of, it's in the ethos. And this is not where it will end. You are absolutely right. It will not be where it is today. The way its relationship with the global world is not the way its relationship will eventually end. What I want to better establish, though, are what certain events, like why I asked you if a country still is issuing fiat on a Bitcoin standard, does that propel hyper-Bitcoinization, or is that deemed a failure, unrealistic in your mind? I'd love if you.
I'm pretty open-minded. I'm pretty open-minded to what hyper-Bitcoinization can look like. The only criteria I'm saying is that Bitcoin is the fundamental basis of how we measure value. So just like electricity is the fundamental basis in which we interact with energy. I mean, I guess so we do it with oil too, but I'm just trying to get on that level. I'm trying to like compare Bitcoin to what I think Bitcoin is comparable to, which is a step change improvement on how we do literally everything when it comes to measuring value.
I mean,
so
it's rooted, but like a lot of what we're talking about, honestly, is it goes back to what we said at the very beginning of this conversation. The idea that we have to go back to fiat, that is, in my opinion, the kiss of death. That would actually lead us to Bitcoin failing, because if every single time you have to be like, Bitcoin will be worth $5 million one day. One Bitcoin will be worth $50 billion one day. Like all of those types of
if all that fiat is backed by Bitcoin, then the credit scenario in which that you are obliging yourself to is completely different than what it was before. So it's like you can't say like we'll be back to like a fiat standard if that fiat is literally measured in Bitcoin. So or in sats, because most likely it'll be like one USD equals like a quarter of a sat, and you'll be able to put in your chunk of your quarter of a sat. You put in your sat, you get like 5 USD. Maybe you need to use those USD when you're in that jurisdiction, but maybe you'll think twice before you go to that jurisdiction because the one next door doesn't make you buy their shitcoin to live in that place. I don't know. Like, I think that sounds like hyper Bitcoinization, and there's currently there's country competition, and maybe we'll all have a choice between, if we use Bitcoin or if we use some sort of shitcoin that is backed by Bitcoin.
You guys are right. I
love how everyone is agreeing with me. Like normally when I push this angle, everyone is like, dude, Christian, you're insane. Like get realistic, insane, man.
I mean, look, all three of us are totally insane, but in the best possible way.
You are the two kids in, I keep using this fucking thing just because it's so fresh in my mind, but you are the two kids in The Big Short that started celebrating that Brad Pitt had to be like, yo, what are you celebrating?
No, fuck that. No, that is not true.
No, he totally is. He totally is. Like what you are celebrating is the demise, and there's going to be a lot of pain, which I'm not saying is not unnecessary. It is going to be necessary to get to this point, but I think we cannot just scoff or ignore these things.
You're moving the goalpost.
You're just saying, you're pretty much saying,
how did I move the goalpost?
Hurt when we rip off the Band-Aid, so let's just keep the Band-Aid on.
No, that's not what I'm saying. I'm simply saying, where are the pressure points that are going to hurt? Where is the hair on your skin that you have to be conscious about when you get to that point? There's not hair everywhere on my skin, despite how hairy I am. There are certain points while I'm ripping the Band-Aid off that don't hurt as much as other points. So what I want to know is, where are the points that are going to really hurt?
Q, I think
those points get fucked.
I think you're being a little bit disingenuous here. I mean, you were texting me earlier trying to get me to invest in your startup where you want to mine Bitcoin with orphans. I think to be having a conversation about humanity and not celebrating too much while you're simultaneously pushing that agenda.
Okay, you can't call me out for moving the goalpost and then like give me some like bullshit joke. Like, how did I move the goalpost? How did I move the goalpost?
I feel like you're putting words in CK's mouth with each of the things. Like he's saying one thing, and then you're like, how can you say that, genetically engineered giant crickets will not eat your face off eventually?
That's not what I've done. I'm simply asking you to explain or think through when this scenario comes to fruition, which I do agree with and believe it will happen. But I frankly believe that there will be moments in time that will be so painful, maybe for only small subsets of the population. And to be honest, I fucking hope it's the government. I hope it's government officials. I hope they fucking rot in some shitty system that they fucking started, and that Bitcoiners and all of us can fucking succeed as a result. So do not think for a second that I'm bearish on Bitcoin. I so adamantly believe. What I am challenging both of you to do, however, is let's talk through where we need to be better prepared for a real fight, and where are certain fights that are just, that's not a real fight. The perfect example for me is the petrodollar. The petrodollar will take care of itself. That is not something Bitcoiners, in my opinion, need to be focused on or worried about. It is literally happening in real time. It is happening in real time in Saudi Arabia and Russia, that they do not give a flying fuck about getting the dollar back for their oil. So that is why I think something like the petrodollar doesn't need to be the focus of our time. Something like housing, I think, is hugely important to discuss and us to think through. How do we get housing out of the hands of the government? How do we get housing out of the hands of private equity firms and put property, realistic and valuable property that people can afford, live off of, grow their families in the same way we used to hundreds of years ago? How do we do something like that? How do we get?
Well, we definitely don't want to go back to hundreds of years.
No. Sorry. Let me
real.
rephrase that. I'm more meaning in the sense of people owning their home. It was not insanely expensive, and you could actually afford a home. Families grew up in this environment without this fear of, oh shit, you know what? If the housing market goes a certain direction, I might have to move my family because I can't afford my mortgage payments anymore. I want to never have that again. I want to never have a single family have to go to sleep afraid that the bank of all things is going to knock on their door and say, get the fuck out of this house.
I mean, but you have to accept that we live in a dynamic world, and it's a hard world out there, and most people aren't set out for success in that world. But the world also has more tools than ever to give people success. And I think Bitcoin is probably the greatest tool ever in order to enable people to find success, have success, earn success in a sustainable way in which they're creating value for the world. So it's just like when you talk about we need to make sure that no one goes without a home, and that the government never takes a home away from someone. It's like, look, if someone defaulted on their home, then yeah, but if homes are less expensive because people aren't storing value in them more, then maybe more people can afford homes without having to have freaking home equality or whatever. Look, the only thing that you can have equality over, in my opinion, is the laws of physics, and that's about it. It's the laws of physics, and then hopefully Bitcoin, right? And hopefully not taxes. But that's it. Outside of that, it's none of us are born equal. All of us have to deal with something. And it's having the most fair world where people have the chance. I think that's the most equitable way, not by effectively making it so that no bad outcome happens to individuals. It's just it is, I don't know. I agree with you. I think that we are, generally speaking, very bullish on Bitcoin, but at the same time, it's when I talk about being prepared for the shit show, it's protect yourself, protect your family, make sure you are prepared for anything that could go down. Maybe America is no longer a good place to be. Maybe it's the best place to be. Who knows? Are you prepared for either of those scenarios? There's a lot of people in Canada who thought that there's no way in hell that they would be able to not be able to protest, and that they were going to be able to hang out in freaking what is it? Oh my gosh, why am I blanking out on the name of the city? It's so freaking important.
Ottawa?
Yeah, they were thinking they could hang out in Ottawa till the summer. They had no idea that their government was going to go completely AWOL. They weren't thinking about those possibilities. If anything, Q, my message is like, hey, like, you probably like be more bullish on Bitcoin, appreciate the stack you already have, focus on all the other shit that could go wrong. That's my message. And like, I'm not saying don't keep stacking, but it's just like, I don't know. Like, you have multiple Bitcoin. Like, if Bitcoin works, you are a gajillionaire. You're chilling. You know, like, you have hundreds of millions of satoshis. You're great. You did it. So make sure that you make it there in one piece. And on the flip side, if Bitcoin doesn't work, what are you doing to make sure that you're not getting totally screwed by the crazy fallout that's about to ensue, no matter what?
What do you think about what's happening in China right now with the tanks moving in and protecting the banks?
I mean, it's absolutely insane. Did you hear about, so there's these banks, I forget which region of China that this is happening in, but they're effectively defaulting. They don't even have the cash to like let people take their money out of ATMs and stuff like that. So the angry depositors start protesting, right? And then the local Chinese government pretty much turned all their COVID passes on positive. So they couldn't like leave anywhere. They couldn't they couldn't go to the store. They're pretty much like on house arrest.
Holy fuck.
I mean,
wait, is that confirmed? They literally just
yes,
flipped them all
absolutely. They
from
did
negative
that.
to positive?
They just flipped their COVID passes on red, and they can't move anymore. So like, more of this shit is gonna happen, guys. Like, more of this shit is gonna happen. Are you ready? And I mean, for those people, you know, the way that they could have helped themselves is holding Bitcoin in cold storage. So I mean, governments are going to continue to act bad. They're going to continue to break trust. And guess what? All the real estate that you have in those governments is liable and susceptible to that bullshit. Just like the real estate in California is liable and susceptible of the bullshit in California. With you know, if you're a landlord in California, guess what? You can't raise your rent anymore until the government pretty much says so. If there's a rent moratorium, then you know you still have to be a landlord. Your house is still depreciating, but the cash flow goes away. So I mean, all of these things are on the table with these crazy states. Are you prepared for it? You know, I think people need to read The Sovereign Individual. I think they need to think about what the sovereign future looks like. And I think they need to think about how messy that transition is going to be, which, you know, Q is obviously talking about.
I want to ask you just, and we have talked a lot about this already, but like, why is it that you think people can't really fathom how far Bitcoin can and will go? What are the things that are causing people to be stuck in this fiat mindset?
I mean, first of all, getting onto the Bitcoin mindset is really hard as like a Bitcoin believer, which just shows why, you know, most Bitcoiners aren't fully converted over and are frankly bearish. But two, I'm like, I can't stress this enough. Like, none of us have the context. Like, you know, it's like, if you it's like saying, like, why can't anyone see a color that they've never seen before, or why can't anyone imagine a color they've never imagined or seen before? It's like none of us like have that ability. Again, you know, it's just like none of us are Nikola Tesla. None of us can like put together these extraneous dots all around and like put together like some sort of like accurate view of the future. You know, again, go to any like recorded newspaper, or a newspaper that's been around for like, I don't know, 50, 40, however many years you want to go. Less, I mean, probably less than 100 years. And like, you can look at like conversations about what the future is going to look like completely off. Like, no one is ever correct ever. So again, like, the only way that you can even remotely try to understand like the step change that Bitcoin brings to the world is to look at other previous step change in the past. So you know, I wish that Pete Rizzo was here to push back on me on my bullishness, but I really do think that, you know, if you look back at the invention of gunpowder, you look back at the invention of steel, you look back at the invention of electricity, you know, all of these things, you know, everyone before them, they had no idea. They were not even close to imagining where they took us. They were not even close.
Yeah. I mean, you can't imagine what you've never seen before. Unfortunately, human imagination has a limitation. To our producer
It's
Chris's
not
point.
humanly possible, Q. That's been my line. It's not humanly possible to be bullish enough.
Would you say Michael Saylor is bullish enough?
Haven't talked to him enough about how bullish he is. I mean, he definitely makes it off that he's very bullish. But I mean, again, like I'm not even bullish enough. Like I can't be bullish enough. It's impossible. And this is me admitting that no one can be bullish enough.
So how do we solve that gap though? Because to your point, Nikola Tesla saw how important electricity was and was the most bullish on helping to push it forward. And as a result, we still use many of his inventions to this day. And many of those weren't prepared to be used in his day and age. So I actually challenge you and say it is humanly possible. History has taught us that there are thought leaders who think ahead of their time and who can see the importance of certain technologies and push forward these technologies. So maybe my question...
That's a diamond in the rough, though. I mean, yeah, when I'm saying it's not humanly possible, I mean that like it is absolutely ridiculous to think that the average person or even a really smart person could think of it. We're talking about the one person, the one person that can put together the dots. Like that's what we're talking about here. Not even a general swath of the population. Like everyone else is bearish.
So do you think that it will be necessary for some diamond in the rough to help push Bitcoin forward, or will it be on the masses to push it forward?
I mean, Bitcoin's going to keep hashing blocks and people will continue finding it useful to store and transfer and communicate value. And that's going to continue to build on itself. And the possibilities from moving from a inefficient monetary system that leaks value and is very difficult. I mean, like, let's talk about how difficult it is to make economic calculations on the current monetary system. Not even the central bankers know what's going on. Like, how do you expect a mom and pop shop to make any sort of remotely accurate economic calculation? So we're moving on to a system that doesn't leak energy, where everyone knows what's going on. 21 million, like my sats are my sats. My percentage of the total cap is locked in and certain. And now I'm building economic calculations off of that. So it's like, guess what? None of us are smart enough to know what that world is going to be like. We're all still operating on the old world. So like, be humble. Like, be humble with your price predictions. Know that you're too stupid and too bearish to come up with something that's even remotely close to what is going to happen if Bitcoinization works, or if Bitcoin works and hyper Bitcoinization happens.
I want to ask you this question that I've asked many of our guests, but the 80-20 principle. Do you think in a hyper Bitcoinized world, 100% of people will actually understand Bitcoin, or will it kind of fall in the same way we've seen something like electricity, where the vast majority of users like don't really know what's happening behind the scenes when they flip their light switch on?
You don't need to know what's happening. You just need to know how to use it. And again, I would argue that most people can't use fiat effectively. But I hope that a Bitcoin-based world, people will be able to use Bitcoin effectively to make economic calculations. And that will change everything. Everyone being able to make good economic calculations is going to change everything. So, and I think that puts the power back in individuals' hands in a really, really big way.
Okay. I want to answer. I want an answer in two different questions of the same vein. How much Bitcoin is enough for the average Bitcoin investor in a hyper Bitcoinization scenario, and how much is enough Bitcoin for a business? How much Bitcoin exposure do businesses need in preparation for hyper Bitcoinization?
Those are impossible questions to answer.
These are literally the questions he sent me, P. These are the questions he sent.
I didn't say business, but I would say whatever Bitcoin you can hold is the right amount. But I just want to put some things in perspective. And I talked about, if you are considering our current scenario, dividing it by 21 million, that's baseline super bearish. But I'm just going to use that logic. And again, This is just linear math. There's no exponentials. There's no regression, nothing, just straight division. Okay. So if you as a person want to get your one person's worth of Bitcoin, so 7.9 billion people divided by 21 million, you need 265,000 sats. So that's today's current population and all of the Bitcoin, 265,000 sats. So you can buy that for like $50 right now. All right. If you want to get a millionaire's worth of value, so now we're talking about global millionaires. So we're talking about there's 56.1 million millionaires on the globe. So now we're talking about 0.374 BTC. So 37,400,000 sats per millionaire. Again, no regression, no distribution, like just straight linear math. Okay. So take all this with a grain of salt. So, I mean, you don't even need a Bitcoin to be in the millionaire class, in this future. And again, that's not even factoring in the growth that will come from Bitcoin being a fundamental upgrade to how we measure and store and express value across the globe. Like that's not even factoring in any of that. So, I mean, that's not bad. Again, you can get 0.37 Bitcoin for, like $7,000 right now. I love the book Sovereign Individual. I think Sovereign Individual is one of the most bullish books about hyper Bitcoinization out there. They predict that there's going to be 100 million sovereign individuals in this future sovereign individual world. Again, like directional guess, like obviously this is not freaking like rocket science or any sort of like, real math here. But again, you take 100 million sovereign individuals, 21 million Bitcoin. Now we're talking 0.21 Bitcoin per sovereign individual. So, I mean, I'm just trying to like throw this out there so people start thinking about like the dimensions in which like we're talking about. And then, like I'm saying, like if you want to be bullish enough, now you bring that up like an exponent. You increase whatever those price predictions are by an order of magnitude, and then maybe you're in the ballpark.
And then add a zero, right?
I mean, yeah, that's an order of magnitude right there. So I said only one, not 2 orders of magnitude, Q. But I'm a bear, so maybe
but
2.
That's
maybe
bearish, man. I'll go 3.
I'll admit I'm a bear.
All right. What is, although we know the answer to this question, what is the most practical way to prepare for binary Bitcoin outcomes?
Hyper Bitcoinization or zero. Get enough sats. Make sure you don't lose those sats. Do everything you can to not fuck that up. And then if Bitcoin goes to zero, probably good to have some other shit.
Should we be discussing this idea that going to like overexposing yourself to Bitcoin to a point where you are uncomfortable with its day-to-day price movement, is that really something that people just need to stomach, or is that a little too far?
Yeah, I would highly recommend against that, because I think Bitcoin Tina again put this really well. You have a cash balance and you have an emotional balance. So you might be good on the cash side to handle that, but maybe your emotional balance is getting drained as that too. So you just got to be realistic. You're a human. Again, you don't have to kill yourself to be wildly wealthy if Bitcoin works. That's my whole message. Is like, dude, fucking buy the tank, buy the gun, get multiple passports, make sure you're feasting, spend money on getting across the finish line the right way in style. And you probably already have enough sats. Like, honestly, if you're bullish enough. And I'm not saying to stop buying Bitcoin. I'm just saying respect the Bitcoin you already bought. Like, appreciate that shit.
I will say it a million times, and I will continue to say it. What works for me may not work for CK, may not work for P, may not work for you. You have to take the time to really calculate this out for yourself and what your appetite is. And I think that's one of the most beautiful things about Bitcoin, because it really forces you to think through your own personal finances in a way that, to CK's point from earlier, the fiat system has never forced you to do so. So I urge everyone to, like, none of this is meant to be financial advice. This is just a conversation amongst three friends. This is literally how CK and I talk to each other in every single staff meeting. So you guys just got a sneak peek at how conversations at BTC Inc. and Bitcoin Magazine really go down. Do your own due diligence. None of this is financial advice. Don't listen to three talking heads on the internet. P, any thoughts here?
No, I'm just enjoying the fireworks, man.
P's
I love seeing CK and Q just going at it. I mean, honestly, I think I made it pretty clear. I take CK's side in this on most of these issues, but
we need to get Rizzo in here. Q needs some help.
No. I mean,
I don't need help. Whoa. I've held my own.
You've done a fantastic job.
I've held my own. I don't need a babysitter here.
Yeah,
man.
CK needed P's help, if anything.
Look, Q put on his big boy pants today, and he did a great job.
Shout out. No Pants Club.
I was going to ask you, are you wearing pants right now? That's how you know you're full-time dollar status.
So I want to address this because this has actually been on my mind during this whole conversation, to go back to P, yours and mine conversation with June Seth and American Hodl. And Hodl threw out something that, like, CK is just going to be like, he's being way too bearish. But this idea that every single pleb is going to get their castle one day with their 0.0001 Bitcoin stack.
Yeah, I mean, I agree.
Like, there is a line here. I think there is a line because, again, I'm not trying to be a fucking bear, but I believe that my kids and my kids' kids will benefit far more from the growth of Bitcoin as the global monetary system than I ever will in my lifetime. So I'm very big on, actually, I have a certain stack amount that I want to put purely as my inheritance pot. And then I want to have a separate stack account that's mine for while I'm alive. And quite frankly, I don't know if that makes me bearish or not, but I do think that there is a little bit of, I think, realism in my approach that, while I would love nothing more than to literally only transact in Bitcoin, literally have bought my fucking house by the beach and my house on my favorite ski mountain that I will not tell anyone, because if everyone fucking knows where that is, it'll get blown up, and I do not want that. But, like, of course I want these things, but I also am prepared to obtain those things through other means. I think there is a little bit of naivety and hope, and actually a lot of hopium in a lot of people that are not calculating risk enough. And they think if they don't pay their rent today, by next week, Bitcoin will pump and they'll be good to go.
I completely agree with you there. I mean, that was what I was saying. Like, this is a marathon, right? Like, I will, let me qualify what I said before. I think the statement, like, who knows if 37 sats will be generational wealth within our lifetimes. And I think, to your point, we need to be realistic, which is why it's so important to, like, manage one's cash flow. Like, I mean, look, like, if you go into it like, I only have 37 sats and I'm never going to need to work again, like, that's not going to work realistically on a lifetime time scale on somebody who's currently alive today. So I hear what you're saying, Q. I don't disagree. I think having a balanced position, and by that I mean opinion, is also important.
That said, though, I do believe what Peter Diamandis has been throwing out there, that in our lifetime, it will be very likely that we can extend our lifespan. So, to CK's point, you probably don't have enough Bitcoin if your lifespan actually ends up being 150 years.
I mean, guys, like, the whole point of my talk is that it's going to be a shit show. You need to prepare for all the different factors, including Bitcoin zero. But if Bitcoin not zero, Bitcoin's going to be worth a shitload. And I mean, Q, like, I totally agree. Like, you should have a Bitcoin stack for the future, and that the future is going to benefit from Bitcoin far more than we will. But with that being said, like, our lifetime is pretty long. Both of us, not quite 30 yet, and a lot can happen if you don't die. If you make it to the 80s, if you make it to the 90s, 90-year-olds now are already living far better than 90-year-olds ever lived before. So I'm hopeful. I'm pretty hopeful that you're going to be able to see the fruits of your Bitcoin too. Maybe it won't be 37 sats as generational wealth territory quite yet, but us making it to 2140 past the next block or going to 0 block reward, that's probably unlikely too.
Before we wrap up today, CK, what are any other points that we haven't been able to touch on that you want to touch on?
Man, respect the Bitcoin you already have. Try your best to be bullish enough. It's not humanly possible. It's stupid to talk about Bitcoin in some middle scenario. It's either ultimate success or it's going to kill itself. Like literally, it'll kill itself, as in it will stop paying for miners and no one will care, right? So it'll kill itself. Yeah, be bullish enough. Be prepared for everything or nothing, and make sure that you figure out all the other things so you can get across this crazy fucking triple harbinger. Fourth turning, whatever the fuck we're about to experience.
P, final thoughts?
I would say, I'd remind everybody that everything we've said, we talk a lot about getting your money off exchanges, taking radical personal financial responsibility. And I cannot stress enough, make sure that you actually are taking that responsibility. Go and learn how to use the tools. Make sure you understand how backups work. Make sure you understand the risks and how to effectively store your seed phrases, and go through that process at a pace that you are able to take in that information. Because if you fuck it up and lose your seed phrase, there is no CEO of Bitcoin. That's on you. So go do it, but learn how to do it responsibly.
That's how everyone gets even richer.
There you go.
I heard that we're a little early, so maybe we should talk about Bitcoin Amsterdam.
Let's do it.
Y'all, I may be overly bullish on Bitcoin Amsterdam, but I think it's the right amount of bullish. I'm pretty hyped. It's going to be awesome.
Why is it going to be awesome, CK? You got a lot more deets than either of us do, so why don't you spill some beans here?
Well, I mean, we're first and foremost, we're dropping awesome speakers left and right, but we're about to roll out a new campaign and try to motivate Bitcoiners in Europe to start pushing back harder and start to try to, one, introduce more people to Bitcoin, but to help, the regulators and the people around them to understand Bitcoin is real. Bitcoin is here in Europe, and Bitcoin is something that's good. Bitcoin is something that Europe needs desperately right now. The euro is in disarray. Its lowest point since 2001 against the dollar. The Eurozone is in disarray. We see WF clowns everywhere within European government. So it's not looking good in Europe, and Europe needs Bitcoin, and Bitcoin Amsterdam is the best place in order to meet Bitcoiners, in order to experience Bitcoin, in order to meet with the Bitcoin industry. And just frankly, like PQ, I know you guys have both been there as well. Like Amsterdam is sick. Amsterdam is absolutely sick. Really? Okay. Well, I mean,
I'm so excited. Like, this is why I keep joking that like I may never come back, because everyone has always told me how much I need to go and visit this city, how it's like so me. I love to bike. As everyone knows, I'm as big a stoner as they come, and this fucking tolerance break is killing me. There is, I think, a legitimate chance I will not return.
In that case, we need to make sure that you don't go at all.
No!
So we'll keep you here.
I'm not saying I'm not returning to Bitcoin Magazine. I'm just saying I'm not returning to America.
All right, my friends. I think... go ahead. You first.
I just want to remind everyone, because I don't think CK, you said it, ticket prices for Bitcoin Amsterdam go up on Friday. So lock in those tickets now. Don't snooze. Don't FOMO into this thing. We're trying to do this more so because we know there was a large European contingent of Bitcoiners who had a hard time trying to come to America. We're doing this for you guys. So would love to see all of you. Would love to meet all of you there. It'll be a giant party. So let's do it.
CK,
it's gonna be awesome.
Thank you so much for joining us today. Going to give you the final word, and then we'll go to commercial, and we will be back with BTC Sessions.
Yo, I got to give BTC Sessions a huge shout out. He is one of the very first people that taught me about Bitcoin, bought my first hardware wallet after watching his videos. And y'all can follow me at CK_Snarks. Go check out Bitcoin Magazine. Go check out Bitcoin Conference, both Bitcoin 23 and Bitcoin Amsterdam. If you want to get our Bitcoin Amsterdam whale experience, do it now. We just dropped a bunch of details on the website, so check that out as well. All right, y'all. Thanks for having me. Stay bullish.
Love it. Chris, roll the tape. We'll be right back.
Welcome back, everyone, and thank you for sticking through those commercial breaks. I'm very, very excited to introduce none other than BTC Sessions, who has his own YouTube channel. Many of you who are familiar with him, myself included, consider him probably my favorite teacher in the Bitcoin space, and I'm truly honored that you've taken the time to grace us with your presence, man. How are you doing?
Dude, I'm great. I'm happy to be here. Thanks for having me. Always love chatting with you and P. And shout out to CK, who's just on. That dude is a legend. Love him. And yeah, man, having a good time, having a good summer.
Yeah, man. So we wanted to really talk to you. I mean, you are best known for running, the BTC Sessions YouTube channel, which I had a moment of the weekend where it kind of clicked in my head. It's like, oh, sessions, like, class. BTC classes. Okay, got it. Yes. I only just had this realization like 3 days ago. So
I love it.
But let's talk a little bit about first, what inspired you to really go down this path? I know you very famously talk about how you were offered a few Bitcoin to live off of in 2013, I believe. Kind of regretting actually spending that Bitcoin now, but what really set you on this path to be the resident teacher in the Bitcoin space?
So I think it kind of came from a place of necessity for myself, in terms of when I started learning about Bitcoin. I'm a pretty visual learner. So I was actively searching for visual guides of how to do stuff. And I could not find any. Just really, in and around 2014, there just wasn't a whole lot that could help me through some of the stuff that I needed to do. It would often be like, go to this message board and there's some comments halfway down that kind of explain, or here's go to the GitHub and there's an explanation there, and just stuff that I found more difficult to parse through. If I was lucky enough to find something that had screenshots and examples, it was better. But more or less, I ended up spending 2 years kind of trying to parse through everything myself in a variety of different aspects. And once I got comfortable with it, I figured I'd just make the thing that I had been looking for, so that I could at least help a few people avoid having to dig as deeply as I did for all of that type of stuff. And so I started in 2016. I started the channel. Actually just hit the 6-year birthday of the channel this past month. So yeah, so it's
Heck yes,
been
congrats,
going
brother.
thanks, man. Yeah. So it's been going for 6 years, but yeah, I started doing, I figured I'd just do a video once a week on whatever I felt like covering. And then I didn't stop and I increased the frequency of videos. So here we are 6 years later.
What was the first video?
The first video, the very first one, other than like an initial intro of what the channel was going to be, I believe was either like a basic Bitcoin mobile wallet, and I can't recall which. It might have been Copay, which was like a BitPay multi-sig mobile wallet that could also be single sig, or it might have been a Bitcoin ATM, how to use one. Those were two of the first videos that I ever did. I've since, migrated to plenty of other options, but yeah, those would have been the first couple.
So let's talk a little bit, because I think what you have afforded people the opportunity to have if they go out and seek it is, we talk a lot about self-custody. This is self-education. You talk about how like you went down this rabbit hole. It was painful and you didn't want other people to kind of go through that. I feel like, there are a lot of channels that have now since practically replicated what you try to do. How important is self-education on this path of self-sovereignty?
I think it's so important because, you don't know what you don't know, right? And so many people, they put off the personal responsibility of gaining that knowledge and they just defer to somebody else. There so much of what Bitcoin was built for, people completely ignore by sinking some money into an exchange and leaving it there, which is like the worst thing you could do. It's the antithesis of what Bitcoin was built for. And the only way to get around that is to start learning and take that first step. I know it can be scary, but you can start learning and taking those first steps yourself now, or potentially learn a very expensive lesson later on down the line, as we've seen in droves, not just this year, but over the past decade. It's littered with examples and stories of people who thought their money was safe with other people, and just to realize that no, it's going to be frozen. No, they're insolvent. No, it was a rug pull. Name it, you got it. It's all happened before, and that's why self-custody. It's kind of it's completely inverse to what we've learned through our entire lives of, put your money in the bank, it's the safest place for it. And in fiat world, that's just what we learned. But and it seems counterintuitive, but the way that Bitcoin is designed, it's as difficult to try and get the keys of an individual across the world as it is to try and get the keys or hack an exchange. The amount of effort put forth is similar. And so when you've got a honeypot of everyone's money, that's much more of a target on your back than self-sovereignty and holding your own keys. So, yeah.
But you do a lot more than just, self-sovereignty. What are sort of the themes that you like to explore, and what are across the spectrum? Like, what are, other than just custody, other than setting up your wallets?
Yeah, I think other than the nitty gritty of just how do I get a wallet? How do I secure my coins? I like diving into, and this is still kind of down the vein of tutorials, but the idea of running a Bitcoin node, of don't trust verify, of being able to host an entire copy of the Bitcoin blockchain, all of the history of transactions that have ever existed and the rules that govern the network, and making yourself resistant to someone trying to co-opt the network. I think that's an important one. And that's one that became particularly important to me in 2017, watching the block size wars and watching a large number of, 80% of the hash rate and, some of the top companies, like 50 of the top companies in the space, all say we're going to change the Bitcoin protocol and install our own devs. And to see that fail, in particular, because people said, nah, we're going to run our own nodes. I think that's a huge win for Bitcoin. And I think it's important that people learn that and learn how to partake in that if they see fit. Not everybody has to run a node, but I think it's very important that they can if they choose to. So trying to put forth stuff like that, trying to show different privacy tools that people can use and not have people be frightened of them. That's been part of my journey, especially this year, kind of learning more in the privacy realm. And then again, kind of a separation of money and state, I think is very important. And having censorship resistant money is incredibly important, which obviously you guys have been touching on at Bitcoin Magazine with this last issue drop. So yeah, those are kind of the key tenets that I gravitate towards.
I love it. I want to ask you about just the specific process you go through. I'm so curious because your videos are so comprehensive and you go through and you edit them. How long does it take you from, idea to shooting to releasing a video in terms of all the steps that are required?
Yeah. So it depends on what I'm doing. So the tutorials can vary. I've kind of fallen into a schedule where, I do a couple live videos every week. So I do a Thursday news show, just kind of recapping what happened over the past week. I do a Friday panel show called Why Are We Bullish, where people come on with different topics that they're excited about in Bitcoin currently. And those ones, it's just kind of prepped through the day, do the live show, and that's it. So they're just encapsulated in a single day. But the tutorials really can vary depending on what I'm covering. So if it's a simple wallet tutorial or something like that, my flow will typically be, I'll tinker with it a little bit, kind of learn my way around the app. Then I'll write a flow of, okay, what am I going to cover first all the way through? So setup and so on and so forth, give myself jot notes, and then I'll just start recording bit by bit, intro, prerequisites you may need, setup, all that kind of stuff. I'll go through it all, edit it all together. You got to do thumbnails, you got to do descriptions, you got to upload it and share it and do all of that stuff. If it's a simple topic, I can get one of those out in a single day. If it's a more complicated topic, so one of the more recent ones that I did is I wanted to do the most in-depth tutorial on the cold card wallet that I possibly could do, that anybody has put on the internet so far.
This is the MK4, right?
Yes, on the MK4, yeah. So that one, it took me a day of experimenting with all of the features. I was already familiar with how a cold card works, obviously, because I use it a lot, but a lot of the advanced features I just hadn't tinkered with yet. So it's like a day of messing around with that, followed by a day of just shooting all of the different pieces. And that flowed into another day of finishing that up, editing it all together and getting it online. So that was a full 3 days, and like long days, not 8 hours. By it was getting into the evening and my wife's like, it's dinner and I have children that I need help with. And I was like, I'm so sorry. This
You're like, too bad.
This one's a tough one. So I mean, she's very forgiving when I get into something that's a little bit more in depth and it takes a little bit more time. But yeah, that was, there were like 10, 12-hour days in there for 3 days straight to get that one out. So it varies, but that's why I kind of have that flex room in there. Monday through Wednesday is like somewhere in there, tutorials getting done. It's just a question of how long that takes.
I love it. What is your favorite feature of the new cold card? I have not had the privilege of playing around with one yet.
Oh, okay. So there's a number of things. So the virtual disk thing is pretty cool. So I didn't understand what that even did. So virtual disk mode, typically when you're using your cold card, you're air gapping it. So meaning you don't plug it into your computer or phone or anything. It's all, you just power it separately. And then you have your whatever third-party interface you're using. So in my case, Sparrow Wallet on your desktop. You set up the transaction there, you save it to an SD card, put in the cold card to approve it, and then bring it back signed to broadcast it. With the virtual disk mode, you basically have a mini disk on the cold card itself. So it loads up as if it was a thumb drive. So you can plug it into your computer, not as secure as fully air gapping it. However, you use the virtual disk to bring over the data from the transactions. And this is different from having Sparrow or whatever wallet you are using actually interface with the cold card. Because when you do that, when you just plug it in and you say that you want to send it with Sparrow and then you approve it on the cold card and it's communicating with the wallet, what you're technically doing is you're giving that wallet control over the device, which you don't know exactly how it's going to do that. Whereas with this, you're still doing the same flow that I described with air gapping, and you're pulling it onto that virtual disk, approving it, pulling the signed transaction off and uploading it. So I think that's a really cool thing. NFC is in the process of being added to Blue Wallet. So that's going to be huge. I'm going to be very excited to play with that, but it's not out yet. So video incoming whenever that drops. But then other stuff like the trick pins on it. So anybody who's played with a cold card before, you could have like a duress pin or a brick me pin. So you'd put in a pin and it would kill the whole device kind of thing, as a security mechanism. The way they've done it with the Mark IV is you get the versatility of saying, if this pin is entered, then this behavior will happen. And you can customize that however you want. If this pin is put in, I'll go to my duress wallet with a decoy amount of money. If this pin is put in, I will wipe the seed. If this pin is put in, the device gets bricked. If this pin is put in, the device will freeze for 1 hour. So you can really customize it to do whatever the hell you want it to do, which is amazing versatility.
That's awesome, man. I can't wait to get one. Still stuck with my MK3.
It still works fine though. The MK3
sure.
has all of, like they're adding in a lot of those pin features to the MK3, and they're more or less there. Flow is a little bit different, but I just did a workshop in Vancouver on the cold card, and some had the 4 and some had the 3, and more or less they could do all the same things. The main differences were the virtual disk and NFC, of which I mentioned, but we didn't fully cover. We mostly got the basics of how to use it, and it's still, MK3 holds up big time.
I do love the virtual disk functionality. I didn't even realize that was a feature. That sounds extremely handy.
Yeah.
I love it. Q, it looked like you were about to say something at some point during the, no. Okay. So one thing that I'm curious about as well is, how is the progression of your tutorials gone over time? Like what are sort of the biggest step improvements that you feel like you made over the course of your show? Because frankly, I haven't watched your earliest ones, but I feel like it was just like you came out of the gate and it was like high quality, high value stuff.
Well, I appreciate that, but that definitely wasn't the case.
So you're calling me a liar. I see how it is.
Yes, I'm saying you're a dog-faced. What's the quote? Pony-faced, horse-faced liar or something like that.
I don't even know.
whatever it was. Anyways, okay. So I'd say it took me a lot longer to get my tutorials out back then. I also wasn't as clear in a lot of my messaging. I think one issue that I've had over time is you do so many of these things that you get a little bit into the habit of glossing over things that I used to clarify every single time. So like, oh, this, write down your backup. And somebody would be like, what's a backup? Why do I need to write it down? Why is that important? What are these words? Like all of those little things, where if it's a basic wallet tutorial, then you got to go back and be like, who's likely watching this? And still throw it in just in case, regardless. I think the way in which I film, like being able to have like screen shares and multiple screens and everything, the editing process is a lot easier. It's mostly efficiency on the back end of what I'm actually doing and how quickly I can put things together. But the other main benefit is with 6 years of tutorials sitting there, I can be like, hey, if you're dealing with this, if you're using this particular tutorial, here's some prerequisites that you're going to want to know. And I've got videos for all of those. And so if rather than starting here, if you're confused about the following concepts, go to these other videos linked down below first and then come back here. And that's just something that you can't do when you start a channel. Very difficult. Whereas now I can be like, hey, I have all of the other steps that you need to get to where this video is starting from. So go there first.
I was thinking, I mean, you could just like make stuff up. You could just be like, oh yeah, go check out this awesome video I did. And then just, there's no link to it ever. It doesn't exist.
Yeah. I'll try not to do that. Sometimes though, I've said, link to this is down below. Go check out that other video. And then the comments are like, where is it? So yeah, people have to do some manual searching, but it's always there somewhere.
Very cool. I had another great question I was going to ask you. It's gone like tears in the rain. I know what it was. What are some of, this is a question I like asking people, what are some of the technologies that you were most excited about, or things that are being developed in Bitcoin right now?
I think, so I've been interested in a lot of the privacy stuff lately. I think, I've said this to a few people, but I'm kind of viewing privacy the way that we viewed scaling back in early 2017. But I think we're better off than we were for privacy now versus for scaling in 2017. And what I mean by that is beginning in 2017, scaling and transactions per second were like top of mind for everyone. How are we going to scale this thing? How are people going to use it without fees getting insane, so on and so forth? We had nothing yet. By now, 5 years later, we scaled on chain. So we got SegWit. There's a whole bunch of other efficiencies that are on chain as well when it comes to things like Taproot and soon eventually Schnorr signatures, all that kind of stuff that basically, and not to mention people just using Bitcoin more efficiently. All of the exchanges are batching transactions now, so on and so forth. So we've scaled massively on the base layer. But beyond that, we have the Lightning Network, which literally did not exist at that point in time. And now I use Lightning daily. On top of that, it's very easy for anybody to onboard to Lightning now. Like literally download Moon Wallet, send a regular Bitcoin transaction to it. Congratulations, you can now use all those funds on the Lightning Network. And so Moon is MUUN, by the way, if you're looking for it.
Gotta say it every time.
Yeah, gotta say it. But I think that the amount of innovation that we saw in scaling when it was top of mind as of 2017 to now is going to be happening in and around privacy, because it's top of mind for so many people now is privacy. And I think that we're in a much better place because we already have so many privacy tools available. Now, is it the easiest thing to utilize those privacy tools? Not necessarily, but there's a plethora of them out there, and they're only going to improve from here. So, you can do coin joins, right? Sparrow Wallet has it all built in. You can coin join X number of rounds and then mix directly into your hardware wallet for safekeeping. That's amazing. You've got, much better default privacy guarantees on Lightning. Not perfect, but definitely way better. And so you can enjoy a reasonable amount of privacy just using Lightning transactions. And I definitely know that from experience. Beyond that, and beyond that, yeah, cryptic. And it's not everybody's cup of tea, but you have side chains, things like Liquid Network, where they have confidential transactions, which shields not only the amount being sent, but the asset being dealt with. So all you see is that a transaction took place and that's it. There's plenty of cool things. There's also, now I'm forgetting the name of it. There's something called Mercury Wallet, and it uses, why am I forgetting it now? I'm literally going to look it up right now. It uses what is known as state chains. There we go.
Oh, yeah.
And that's basically trading UTXOs with people, basically trading the keys to UTXOs without the ability of somebody to spend using your key once they get it. There's some stuff going on in the background there, but basically there's no indication that any transaction has taken place in the blockchain, but you now own different Bitcoin. And you can do this right now. So you can download Mercury Wallet and start using state chains right now. And it's for specific denominated amounts. So you'd have like 1 million sats or something, and you effectively trade the keys to those sats with somebody else. And then you go off on your merry way, withdraw it to another wallet. And now you have an entirely different UTXO, and nobody even knew that that transaction took place. So amazing things being done. And I can only imagine 5 years from now how much cool stuff there's going to be.
Yeah. Yeah, state chains are very cool. Mercury Wallet is awesome. I'm also excited about Fediment. And, we've been talking about that a lot lately with the news that just came out, but super excited to see where that goes. And I think it's going to be a game changer in terms of helping people in less affluent areas who are not exposed to Bitcoin or don't have the time to really sink their teeth into it, to be able to offload some of that onto, a trusted group of guardians that already exist, people you already trust, whether it's your community leaders or, members of your church or your whatever it is. I think that's a really cool innovation.
And I have to dive deeper into Fedimints. I've just kind of had a cursory like, hey, this is more or less how they function, but I've got to go read the documentation and get deeper down. But this is what I mean. Like this is kind of information. It's kind of been Chaumian MITs has been a thing that's been around for a while, but hasn't been front of mind for a lot of people. And so now I see lots of information about this dropping. And again, just another tool in the Bitcoin tool belt, and people will have different risk profiles for different things and different preferences. But the fact that we have options out there is incredible.
Yeah. And just for the audience, what we're talking about is Fediment, which is the same thing as an abbreviation for Federated Chaumian Mints. Obi Nwasu and Eric Sirian and Justin Moon also just launched a company called Fedi, which is building out a wallet that focuses on this. So there's some great coverage out there. Obi's written a couple articles for Bitcoin Magazine. I think there's 2 that came out, or there's one that just came out yesterday. So I'll put that link in the chat again, and you guys can check it out. Ben, I saw you at Bitcoin 2021, and you had like something covering your hair, because I feel like, and I think we talked about it at one point. You were like, "Yeah, bro, this hair. I mean, it looks fly as fuck, but it is a liability because I can't go anywhere without people being like, yo, it's Ben." And I can only imagine like what happens, like, because you could never change your hairstyle at this point, right? Like,
yeah, it's locked in. It's locked in. This is, there's a time lock on it. And it expires when I disappear from Bitcoin.
So, bro, I feel you on that though. Like I feel you on that.
You would be very easily identifiable in a crowd as well. I think there's a handful of people that experience that.
So, only on the topic of hair, and we'll keep this super brief, but this hair is like a new thing for me. This is like a year-old top. So like when I go to people from my past lives, they do not recognize me, and honestly, I fucking love it.
It is great. It's funny. Yeah, P, you're saying that you saw me like cover my. Typically, I don't care, because it's amazing when somebody comes up and they're like, "Yo, I use that tutorial and I'm running a node now." That's some of the most flattering stuff I've ever encountered, and it's incredible. The only time I've ever like put something on my head is when I had to get from one place to another very, very quickly for something important.
That's exactly what it was, by the way. You beelined like straight for the bar to get like a bottle of water or something, and then you like went straight back. I think it was to like the Swan Dome at that point. To like, I think you were recording a podcast or something. But it was, I saw you and I was like, ugh, and I was like, nah, he's a man with a mission.
Yeah.
I also feel like it's like like in movies where somebody like they're a superhero, they like put the little mask on and nobody recognizes them, or they take, Superman takes the glasses off. I feel like it's the same thing. You take your hair off and you just be like immediately completely anonymous.
Dude, it worked. It worked. Even at Bitcoin 2022, there was a couple buddies of mine down, and we're like, okay, well, at one point we're going to have lunch. And then I met up with them in the concourse there, and we're like, okay, let's go to the I can't remember what it's called, but yeah, we're going to go up to the place. We're going to grab some food. And it's a long, it's a big venue. So it was a long walk, and we're stopping like every minute, minute and a half. And my friend was like, dude, just put that shit on your head and, and we'll walk. So I literally just put, I went to one of the booths and asked for a free shirt of whatever vendor it was. And I just wrapped it over my head. And then we made it there in record time. It was great.
It works, man.
Yeah, I was surprised because I was like, no way, this is actually going to end. Yeah, no, it's without the beacon going. It appears that I can move freely. So again, when I eventually fade into the background, when Bitcoin education is no longer needed, I can just buzz my head and nobody will ever recognize me again.
It's a gift. It's a curse. Q, it's a question I know you love to ask everyone. Go for it.
Thank you. So, Ben, or BTC, you do an incredible job of, teaching people how to really understand and use Bitcoin. However, I'm curious what your opinion is on the idea of the 80-20 principle as it relates to Bitcoin and its understandings. Today, most people couldn't tell you how, when they start their car or flip a light switch, how that actually is, what the process behind that is doing. Is there a point when we reach a hyper Bitcoinized world where not everyone is going to both know and understand Bitcoin, nor will it be necessary? Is that a realistic outcome in your opinion, or is that actually a dangerous outcome?
I think that's an eventuality, right? Like you're going to get to the point where people obviously do not understand the underlying infrastructure. That's already largely the case. Somebody can go to an exchange, buy some Bitcoin, and if they're actually self-custodying, they can download a wallet, back it up, and no problem. They don't need to understand what's actually happening there. They've taken self-custody. They're totally fine. I think it's important that a critical mass of people have an understanding of the infrastructure. And I like this kind of hard line, maximally self-sovereign group of people that keep on pushing for everyone to step outside their comfort zone towards that end. I think that's going to continue to be needed. And the most important part, again, is that it's always accessible to all if someone chooses to do it. I love the development in and around easy plug and play nodes. I think that's super important. Now, can that be, if everybody runs the exact same implementation, can that be a liability? Absolutely, but it beats nobody running nodes in the first place. So I think that what you're getting at is as more and more of the world uses Bitcoin, there's a number of things and a number of services that by design become obsolete in their very nature. Exchanges is one of them, right? In a world where Bitcoin is the currency, why do you need an exchange to get out of dollars? I mean, I already don't technically need an exchange to get Bitcoin. I earn Bitcoin that as a living. And so that for me, that on ramp on-ramp companies are already obsolete in a sense. Now I still need the off-ramp in companies that bridge the gap so that I can pay bills where I can't pay Bitcoin directly, so on and so forth. But more and more of those things are going to go away. And people won't necessarily understand what's going on in the background, much like they didn't understand what was going on in the background when we changed from phones via phone lines and switchboards to VoIP, right? Like nobody really understood what happened in the background. All of a sudden, their phone calls just got a lot better quality and a lot cheaper. And so I think that's kind of the direction we'll head with Bitcoin. Less and less people will understand exactly what's going on. But my hope is that they will understand why it's better money. And hopefully they'll understand why it succeeded historically versus gold, or at least like a core group of people educating people on money will be able to explain like, hey, we had a pretty good sound money before, but it failed because of its physicality, which led to centralization of ownership and easy confiscation. I hope that that becomes a mainstay of financial education in the future, and I think it's starting to be so. But we will see. As long as that message gets through, I think we'll be okay.
I won't lie. I was looking at other tabs. Sorry.
Okay.
I like this idea though that while no, they won't understand Bitcoin and the technology behind it because there will be so many offerings to make the user experience easier. There's maybe with a little bit of hopium injected, this necessity to understand why at least Bitcoin is better than the fiat we have or the gold we have. What would be your just obviously we all have sort of our go-to, I like to call them my 6 Pokemon to pull out of my little satchel anytime I talk about Bitcoin to a non-Bitcoiner. What are some of like your go-to quick hit arguments to why Bitcoin versus anything else?
Are you talking about fiat, or are you talking about
okay. I'll actually separate it out. What is your go-to for Bitcoin versus fiat, Bitcoin versus gold, Bitcoin versus any shitcoin?
Okay. All right. So, I mean, versus fiat, simple question. Well, how many dollars exist? How many dollars will exist next year? How many dollars will exist in 10 years? Do you have a say in that? Do you actually hold your money? Probably not. It's probably in a bank account. What happens if the bank account tells you you can't have it anymore? What kind of recourse do you have? All those types of arguments are pretty simple. And I mean, again, Canada, leading example this year of people that were doing something legal until it was deemed not at the drop of a hat, and all of a sudden found that legacy finance had failed them because they didn't have access to their money. And you can see this in, name your political dissident situation anywhere in the globe, and you'll see parts of that. You can also point to hyperinflation. You can point to the fact that humans are notoriously bad when shown the opportunity to print more money. They're going to do it. They're going to debase the currency, even if they don't do it with malice in mind. It ends up not helping people. So there's that. Bitcoin versus gold, kind of what I alluded to earlier. The physicality of it was its Achilles heel, right? It resulted in deferring to custodians. It was difficult to transport over long distances. Yeah, it held its value over long periods of time, but the distance thing resulted in needing to create kind of derivative money, paper that you would move around that represented bits of gold, so on and so forth. So the divisibility thing was a little bit more difficult. And in the end, when you create a money on gold that is linked to gold, that link can be broken because it's not an immutable link. So when somebody like Peter Schiff says, well, if we had a crypto that was linked to gold, it's a terrible idea because, dude, you just watched that play out in 1971, and that's exactly how it will play out again. So yeah, when it comes to Bitcoin versus all other coins, Bitcoin had such a unique early stage because nobody really understood that value could even be had there. And because of that, it was given free reign to grow that first few years uncorrupted. And that's something that hasn't really been afforded to others. And at this point, the ability to change the base protocol of Bitcoin in a non-backwards compatible way is more or less out the window, unless it was like a 0-day, everybody get on board and change this now, or the whole project is dead. If you want to put in arbitrary changes to Bitcoin, it's very difficult to get consensus on that. And that's the feature that we want, because we want to be sure that our money is sound, that it's immutable, that it's censorship resistant. And when you can willy-nilly change things, then those promises of a sound, censorship resistant, global immutable money are called into question. And so, yeah, I mean, that's my quick run through all shit coins everywhere. I kind of view it as, gold would have been good if it wasn't for the transferability and divisibility thing over large spaces. But I mean, fiat is one entity can print money. Crypto is everyone can print money. Bitcoin is no one can print money.
I like that. I like that. And then so what happens when someone says to you something to the vein of, well, it just doesn't matter. I don't care to learn it. Are these the lost souls that will be forgotten in the Bitcoin standard future? Or are these the people we actually have to spend a little extra time helping to drag out?
I don't think they'll be forever lost souls. They'll be the last holdouts will be the ones that are hurt most immeasurably by it, because they'll be the ones clinging to alternatives that don't protect their wealth and their self-sovereignty. But eventually, out of necessity, they'll have to use something like Bitcoin in a hyper Bitcoinized world. And as soon as they start doing that, they will benefit. They'll just benefit less than people who are earlier benefited before them. But as soon as they get on that standard and they start earning Bitcoin for a living and saving, it changes their habits. It changes the way they look at the world. And every sat that they earn and save will always represent the same percentage of the monetary base moving forward in perpetuity. There's no debasing it. If you save 100 sats, then that will be the same percentage of all Bitcoin forever. So I think that's incredible. And whereas nowadays, if your bank account showed your percentage of total dollars, that number will continue to go down in perpetuity unless you're, a cantillionaire and you're able to be closest to the money spigot. That's pretty much how it goes nowadays.
Oh, I really hope they're not lost souls.
They'll be all right. Like, again, in the end, once they're on that Bitcoin standard, they'll begin to benefit. I think, yeah, there can be a lot of pain in between there, though.
So how much do you like when people say it's impossible for everyone to run a node in their home? Do you just send them one of your videos with a little note saying, at one point someone also said it was going to be impossible for everyone to have a phone in their own home?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely not impossible, right? There's parts of the world, yes, where it would be incredibly difficult to run a node when it comes to connectivity and all that kind of stuff, or just cost of hardware if you want to run a dedicated machine, or based on where you are. But it's not everybody has to run a node. it's just important that they have the option. So you may see instances where there's a node being run for a community and people can point their wallets toward that particular node if they want to. And beyond that, like the cost of hardware is coming down. The bandwidth issues are becoming a thing of the past. It's getting to the point now where I'm not sure how many hundreds of gigabytes the Bitcoin blockchain is, but like you're getting thumb drives, not thumb drives, but like micro SD cards that are like 4 terabytes, right? So it's going to become less expensive to run a node if you choose to over time. And eventually it'll probably be pretty feasible to have one on a phone. Like my phone right now is 128 gigabytes, and there's definitely phones that have more space than that, and you can add in SD cards to them that are whatever size you please. So yeah, like it's becoming more and more feasible that you'll be able to run a Bitcoin node on the fly. And I mean, that's inherent to Bitcoin's design. That's why there's been this kind of guarding of the block size limit, of trying to limit the amount of data that's being parsed every 10 minutes, because if you kind of leave that door wide open, then it can become prohibitively expensive, either technologically or actually monetarily, to run and maintain a node. And we've seen the perfect example is Bitcoin SV, because even exchanges that hosted and like bought and sold Bitcoin SV are like, we can't do this anymore. We can't even run the node, dude. Like it's like terabytes and terabytes of data of just like spam transactions to be like, look how many transactions we can do. So it's a losing battle. And they've kind of proven that just in trying to show how much they can scale. They've shown how impossible it is to scale in that manner. So yeah.
This will be fun. This will be a really fun battle to hyper Bitcoinization. What does that mean to you, though? Like, what does a hyper Bitcoinized world look like? What does hyper Bitcoinization mean?
I think it's just when we get to a place where en masse people are deciding to use Bitcoin over their local currency. I think there will be some pain in the interim when that happens, right? An entire world running for the exit, that's not a clean transition. I'm not sure exactly how in a world where that plays out, how it plays out, because I'd like to hope there's some semblance of an orderly transition where not too many people get hurt. And perhaps that could be mildly achieved by countries beginning to use it as a reserve assets, backing their currencies, so on and so forth. Maybe that could be an instance where that happens. But I think it's going to be a little bit more of a quick, like, oh my God, more and more countries are using this as a reserve asset. More and more people don't want to hold dollars and lira and whatever other currencies, and so they're dumping them. I think there'd be some degree of chaos in forex markets and things like that. But once that transition is complete, well, things become infinitely better, in my opinion. People can simply learn a skill and capitalize on it and earn from it. And they don't have to become a professional investor. They can simply earn and save. And like magic, their money will still work and continue to work and preserve its value into retirement, and likely appreciate in value depending on population and human ingenuity. It's very likely that your savings will just have a gradual deflation to them. And I think that's a beautiful thing. In terms of what infrastructure and stuff like that looks like, I think there'll still be services in and around Bitcoin and like quote unquote traditional finance, those types of things, like in terms of loans, and people are going to want to start businesses and take loans. But I think what ends up happening there, as we've seen You can't print away the risk with Bitcoin. And so that makes people look at risk very differently. Am I going to lend my Bitcoin to somebody for a few percent with risk of a total loss? No. More likely, it'll be people that have direct relationships with people that are creating businesses that say like, hey, I think you have a good business there. Maybe I want to have a part of it, and I'll extend a loan that way. But I think risk is going to be completely repriced in a Bitcoin only world, and people will still invest in things, but it will just be a much more calculated decision. It's not going to be people saying, well, gee, I get my paycheck and I know for a fact I can't just save that. So I guess I'll toss it into whatever fund my banker tells me to. I have no idea what I own, not a clue what companies or funds or whatever are in this shit mix that I have in my portfolio. I'm just told that I should expect to be able to retire on it. And that's good enough for me. We won't have that. We'll have people who save their money, and then people that want to take some risk and invest some of their money. And I think that's a much better and more sustainable world.
Will I'm not trying to be an asshole to say it like this, but like, what role will people like you who are educating have in a hyper Bitcoinized world?
I hope to be obsolete, to be honest. Like I think that the channel begins to disappear when most people get how to create a wallet, when people know how to secure their Bitcoin themselves. Yeah, I don't know. I think that I become less and less necessary, and I think that's a great thing. That's kind of the goal, right? Like I don't want to constantly have to re-educate people on things. My hope is that they'll get educated and they'll start to learn about how Bitcoin works, and then a lot of this stuff will become more and more intuitive over time. So, and I am still here. Sorry, my camera just crapped out there. But regardless, I want people to be able to learn this stuff and be able to continue on their own education. I don't think I'll be super necessary in maybe a decade, but perhaps I might be a little necessary if there's a ton of other innovation and apps and different things that you can do in and around Bitcoin. So I could be wrong. We'll see if it's necessary, and there's a ton of other tools that people don't intuitively know how to use in a decade's time. Then maybe I'll be here with a gray streak in my hair instead, still teaching plebs how to use the next thing for Bitcoin. We'll see.
So I want to shift topics slightly. You had some pretty interesting experiences, to say the least, around the protests that happened in Canada. Can you take us through at a high level sort of your involvement, what happened? And really the question that I want to ask you is, how did that change your perception of Bitcoin and where we are sort of in this process of Bitcoin becoming a much larger thing for more people?
Yeah. So yeah, the beginning of this year was a tough one, and it kind of came at me pretty fast. But so the long and the short of it is the trucker protests basically began to materialize when a number of people basically were told, like, you don't have body autonomy, and if you choose not to get vaccinated, then as truckers, you're no longer allowed to cross the American border back and forth. And so they basically lost their livelihoods. But that also extended to even people traveling domestically. So any Canadian that wasn't vaccinated couldn't get on a plane, a train, a boat, any sort of domestic travel. And more or less that has remained it had remained for extended periods of time, like up to recently. I don't even know what the current what our current regulations are now. I believe they've lessened a little bit, but like even up until last month, as a Canadian, you still couldn't even get on a local flight, but you could go to a hockey game with 20,000 people side by side without a mask, and it was totally fine. So, anyways, that's kind of the context around the craziness of some of these restrictions, where people lost their livelihoods, couldn't leave the country if they didn't like it either. Right. So people will say, oh, if you don't like it, leave. Well, there was no option because our only land border was the US, and you needed to be vaccinated to cross it. And you couldn't get on a plane to fly to any country that didn't have restrictions. So that's kind of where things were at. So there is this ended up being the largest protest in Canadian history. And all these truckers converged on Ottawa, our nation's capital. And effectively what happened was there were a couple guys in and around Ottawa. One was BJ Dichter, one of the organizers of the convoy itself. And then there was Nick, aka Nobody Caribou, a Bitcoiner that was in Ottawa supporting the truckers and doing some Bitcoin things there. I believe both of them had previously posted just Bitcoin addresses on Twitter, or just raising a little bit of money. Things kind of got some traction. Greg Foss had spoken with Nick and I believe BJ previously, and then on Twitter reached out to me and said, hey, is there any way we could accept Lightning donations on this? I said, sure, I could probably figure that out. And I ended up creating a couple things. One was a donation page on Tallycoin that would accept on-chain donations and Lightning donations to my Bitcoin node. The second was I created a Twitter handle called Hong Kong Hodl, and kind of started posting there that, hey, this is a donation page. And then I began coordinating with Nick, BJ, Greg Foss, and Jeff Booth was another person that was involved here. And we created a multi-sig wallet between all of us, started migrating funds that went through the donations to that multi-sig wallet just to prevent loss of funds through user error. And so my initial thought was, just to give an idea of scale, I thought, given the previous donation addresses, that we would, maybe get a few $1,000. So my initial goal for the donations was 10 million sats on the page. We got that like almost immediately. The first day we raised like a whole Bitcoin, and then in the span of around 2 weeks, we raised 1/1,000,000th of all Bitcoin that will ever exist. So there's something like 22 Bitcoin or something there, somewhere in that realm. At the same time, as this was happening, and forgive me for kind of parsing the timeline and not perfectly here, but the government effectively declared it illegal. So the protest was seen as an illegal occupation of the nation's capital. They basically painted all of the protesters as, racists or bigots or whatever it was. And don't get me wrong, there's a couple assholes down there flying like Nazi flags. But those people were promptly told to pound sand and get the hell out of there. So obviously not reflective of the entire group. But the Emergencies Act was enacted, which basically gave the government more or less power to do whatever they pleased. And so they chose a few specific things to do. One of them was to freeze bank accounts of people in and around Ottawa that were donating and helping the cause. Another thing was they gave sweeping powers to police and stuff like that. They were basically trying to tackle, there was a couple border closures, which were separate from the main protest. And then they wanted to clear out the city. But in doing so, yeah, they effectively made it illegal to be at the protest, and they gave themselves the ability to shut down people's bank accounts and cut them off from the financial system. So GoFundMe had raised millions of dollars. They effectively prevented that from ever reaching its destination. Give, send, go, same deal. While they didn't bend the knee to the Canadian government, they tried to send money over to a bank account that was belonging to one of the organizers, and TD Bank subsequently froze that money. So that didn't get through either. The Bitcoin, however, ended up being given out to individual truckers. Around 14 and a half or 15 Bitcoin were put on paper wallets, care packages that were able to be swept by individuals. At the time, it was about $8,000 each trucker received, and there's videos of it being given out and everything. Unfortunately, there was a bug in the wallet software temporarily that prevented us from moving the last few Bitcoin out of the multi-sig. The way that it works in Nunchuck Wallet is there's an encrypted chat, and whenever you want to send Bitcoin, you can propose a transaction, and that encrypted chat message gets relayed to everybody else, and anybody with a key can then sign it. The encrypted chat message was not being sent through, so somebody would try to send it and nobody else would see the message, so they weren't able to sign. So we were effectively trying to get all of those funds moved. 15 Bitcoin went out, or in and around there, went out to individual truckers, which they still have. But in the process of that migration, unfortunately, Nick had more keys as we were trying to get it out, and his home was raided by police. They took his laptops and all that kind of stuff. Long and the short of it is that Bitcoin is now sitting in an escrow, awaiting the outcome of a lawsuit, which was launched by a couple individuals in a business in Ottawa that said they suffered losses because of the protests. And so there's something called a Mariva injunction, which says that any funds in association with this particular lawsuit need to stay put until the resolution of the lawsuit. So the legal, I guess, it's in legal limbo. So it's just sitting there. But 70% of all the Bitcoin got to individual truckers. And then the last 30% is sitting in that legal limbo. I don't know. I'm not a lawyer. I don't know what the result of that lawsuit is going to be. It's probably going to take some time. So yeah, more or less, when looking back at this situation, and sorry, this is a super long rant, guys.
No, this is amazing.
So lessons learned. Number one, I made two major mistakes from the get-go, and that kind of pooched the whole thing moving forward, so that even any of the funds were able to be taken. So maybe three things that I would change. Number one, Tallycoin is a platform that allows you to accept Bitcoin donations at the time, and I'm not sure if this has changed since, but it would create a new donation address, not for each donator, but for each new fundraiser. So unfortunately, when I uploaded the XPub, it created the fundraiser, and then it had a single static on-chain address, which gave a very localized central point, which all the funds could be tracked therein. And so law enforcement was able to say, okay, like this went here, we see all the funds. These are bad Bitcoin, so on and so forth. So a better alternative to that would be BTC Pay Server. Unfortunately, when I started the fundraiser, I'd never used it. I didn't know how to use it. I fixed that now, and I've now created a tutorial on how to use BTC Pay Server. Two, the funds were not coin joined, and this again was a mistake in and around how quickly we wanted to get it to multi-sig, because how quickly the funds were building up. Having one person with control of that would not have been ideal. So they were in multi-sig, but then afterwards it's like, oh crap, a lot of money is here. This should be coin joined, in my opinion. Anyways, so it would have been better if the BTC Pay Server went into Sparrow Wallet, did a round of coin join, and then the coin join went into the multi-sig from there. That would have been ideal. And then third is in and around the legality of things. Something that was previously legal became illegal. And so when we had the multi-sig, it was all publicly identifiable Bitcoiners that are Canadians and in Canada. And so when it's a legal protest and you assume it's not going to be a lot of money, it's not that big of a deal to have identifiable Bitcoiners. In fact, it's preferable because everybody is thinking, don't trust, verify. Who has this money? And so we identified ourselves so that people wouldn't be freaking out about where this money was and who had it. Unfortunately, in that instance, when the government doesn't like you, that becomes a major issue, especially since we're all in the country. So I would go back and I would say, rather than having the actual key holders be publicly identifiable, I would have individuals vet the key holders. So as an example of myself, I would be like, hey, I'm putting my reputation on the line, and I know who holds this key. I don't personally, but I vet the person. So if they do something shady, it's going to fall back on me. And then there's at least a little bit of don't trust, verify there. And so, then somebody kicks in my door and demands the key. Well, I don't have it. I can tell you who has it, but maybe they're not even in the country. So those are kind of the main things that I would change. New receiving address every time you receive a donation, which would be BTC Pay Server. Coin join all funds after they come in. Multi-sig was still good. I'd probably do a 2 of 3 instead of 3 of 5 because 3 of 5 was very difficult to coordinate. And then have the key holders vetted but not identified. That would be my takeaway. So there you go. If you're in an adversarial environment trying to fundraise, there's your roadmap, I suppose. Oh, you muted, P.
And I was muted. I just said that was incredible. Thank you so much for going through that with us.
No worries.
One day I'll figure it out, but today is not that day.
Oh, good.
Honestly, I've given up hope. I want to create a button that Chris can press every single time P is just muted, just like that. Womp womp womp.
I have it somewhere on my soundboard.
Yeah.
Man, what a journey.
Yeah.
I can't even imagine.
I want to ask, because like we talked a little bit about this at the beginning of the show, how, if you had asked me a year ago, would the Canadian government take such draconian measures against its own citizens, I would have said no, candidly. Like I would have. What do people who are not in Canada need to learn from this experience so that they themselves do not have to go through this nightmare that yourself, truckers, and countless others had to experience?
I think, this is a difficult one because people become very complacent and willing to put up with a lot of crap, right? Myself included. And so I think the main takeaway is to always, be willing to push back even on the politicians that you think you agree with, hold them to task, but also be self-sovereign, right? The only thing that worked here was the censorship resistant money, and not even perfectly because the tools weren't used to their full extent. But I would say be as self-sovereign as possible while still holding anybody that does have influence in government to a high standard and hold them to task as best you can. And I think always maybe just hedge for the worst possible outcome. So as I was saying in my instance, I made a couple of assumptions that, one, we wouldn't raise much money, and two, that it would remain legal to have a peaceful protest. And neither of those things remained true. Had I gone in with the assumption that maybe we're going to raise a lot of money and maybe this is going to become illegal, I would have gone through all of those steps to ensure that it would remain resistant through all of that. And I see in the chat here, Alexander using Paynim. Absolutely. Paynims are awesome. And again, I started to go down that rabbit hole after all of this went through. So I've now made a couple tutorials on how to use Paynims both on Samurai and on Sparrow Wallet. And they're awesome. So anybody watching that doesn't know what a Paynim is, it's basically and a public identifier that you can share without sharing a Bitcoin address. And then that means there's no easy centralized point of saying, oh, this address belongs to this person. And now I can begin to track their funds and begin to piece together what they have. So a Paynim, somebody can link to you, and then they'll be able to generate addresses for you to be able to send you money without you having to post in a public forum an address that anybody could audit. So I love it.
P, I have a fun, so off-topic question. So unless you have something more to contribute, I want to sidetrack us completely.
Go for it, dude.
BTC, the last time you and I got a chance to really talk, I was on your show, and you admit, and I'm not shy to admit it, like, we're MCU nerds. Love and Thunder. Did you see it? Did you like it?
This is the first one that I haven't seen like right out the gate, sadly. It's because I was on a road trip. So I was doing my workshop in Vancouver. So I left 2 days prior to it coming out. But me and my wife are in the midst of setting up date night so we can go to it, because that's her Hollywood crush. So I'll take that L right there. I'm no Chris Hemsworth, but I'll try.
All right. So who's your Hollywood crush? We heard who your wife's is.
Ana de Armas.
Oh, yes. Yes, she is great.
Super hot. But I mean, my wife finds her super hot too. So that's we're together on that one.
I love that. I love that for you guys. Ben, I wanted to give you the opportunity to also answer. Have you ever been to Amsterdam? And what's the first thing that comes to your mind when you think of the city?
I have been to Amsterdam. I was there actually with my wife for we weren't married yet, but in 2012 we went backpacking through Europe for 3.5 months. And so Amsterdam was the first place that we got to together. And it was a great city. I really enjoyed it. The canals are amazing. So I don't really smoke a lot of weed, but we decided to partake while we were there. And we were staying in this little hostel hotel. I'm not sure exactly what it was, but we were basically in an attic. And to set the stage of where we were, the stairs were so steep in this place that I could stand in front of the staircase and reach my arm out straight in front of me, and I would be touching a stair. That's how steep they were. So we had to traverse this in our giant backpacks. But down at the main check-in area, tiny little cafe, the whole place reeked of weed. And then they had an assortment of edibles there. And so we picked up a space muffin, and the dude at the front desk asked if we smoke very often. I was like, last time I had any maybe was 6 months ago. And he was like, ooh, you guys better split this. And so we did. And so we each had half a space muffin, and we walked around for about an hour, and we both couldn't really feel anything. And right as we were saying how much we couldn't feel it, it was like somebody punched me directly in the brain. And my wife heard me say, "Oh my God." And she's like, "What? I don't know. I still don't feel anything." And then she went silent for about 30 seconds as she went through the exact same process. And then we just wandered aimlessly, and we're super paranoid, and somehow eventually made our way back to our hostel, where we then like sat and kept on are you okay? Yeah, I'm okay. Are you okay? So there's a lot of that. But there's maybe I'll find it, but there's a really great picture of us that we managed to snap. We're like, we've never been this high before, so we'll just get a good like selfie style, and our eyes are just pasted together and like just mid. Yeah. So I will tweet that. I will find it, and I will tweet that photo out after this show.
Please,
okay.
Do it.
That is hilarious. I'm so sorry that you had that experience. I'm definitely going to bully you into taking some sort of a space cake or smoking a joint with me in Amsterdam while we're there.
Dude, well, first I gotta make sure that I'm going. I do want to go. I don't know if I don't know in what capacity, but I would love to maybe partake and speak or something, whatever's needed. So, yeah.
Amazing.
You heard it here first, Alex.
Fucking
Yeah,
go.
Alex, get me there.
Yeah. I want to ask, but just as we're kind of wrapping up, I know you've been doing some workshops, some in-person workshops specifically around using the cold card. Can you, like, what's going on there? Can you tell people about it? How can they learn more about these?
Yeah, so I just did my first in-person workshop. I've done plenty of like one-on-ones with people. People are always asking, like, despite the fact, and I should caveat this by saying, I always have free stuff. So anybody who wants to learn, there's always going to be free videos on what you want to learn. However, some people, they just want that extra hand holding and the ability to, like, on the fly be like, what is this? What, how there's something I encountered that wasn't in the tutorial. And like, they just want an hour of me sitting there with them. And so I do a lot of one-on-ones like that where people go and they'll book me for an hour on my website. However, I thought it would be kind of cool to be able to have a classroom setting and like have an in-depth, like deep dive workshop. So I did my first set of those in Vancouver on the 16th of July. So just this past, 5 days ago, 6 days ago, whatever it was. And they were great. So I did a learning self-custody workshop, and it was like a 3-hour kind of marathon. So everything from like getting your funds off the exchange, setting up a basic wallet, using it, doing transactions, understanding transaction fees, deleting and restoring your wallet. We got into using Lightning and showing how Moon works versus how Blue works and different backups. And then we discussed different types of hardware. So I gave a rundown of kind of all the top hardware options out there to kind of set them on their next steps towards self-custody and security. So that was kind of the morning session. And then in the afternoon session, we did a 4-hour deep dive on Cold Card. And so again, that ran the gamut of kind of the zero to hero basics of setting the thing up, backing it up, using it, air gapping transactions, restoring a device, so on and so forth. So we did all of that. And then we dove in the later parts into some of the more advanced features and how they work and what they do and how to use them. So it was pretty great in my opinion. I learned a lot, and I'll be able to tweak and make them even better. I think moving forward, what I will probably do next time I do one of these, which I'm not entirely sure when, but I'd like to do more traveling workshops. I think I'll always do a short 1-hour beginner session for free at the beginning of the day. And then I'll probably have 2 deep dives for the rest of the day. Cold Card will probably remain because that one I feel like went really well. But I'd also like to do maybe something on nodes, or maybe something on different privacy tools, or maybe something on multi-sig. Lots of options there. But yeah, I basically want people to be able to come along and like really get into the nitty gritty and start using some of this stuff and experimenting. I think it's incredibly useful.
I love it. It sounds fucking awesome, man. Where can people find you on Twitter, YouTube? How can they get access to your amazing content?
Yeah, man. So you can follow me on Twitter at BTC Sessions. You can also find me on YouTube. Just search BTC Sessions. There's tons of stuff there, but yeah, you can subscribe to that channel. And then I also have a website, btcsessions.ca, because I'm in Canada, of course. But that's where people would find me if they want to actually book like a one-on-one, or online kind of individual session to help you through whatever you want. So yeah, those are kind of the main places that you can find me.
Love it. Love it. Well, on that note, I want to thank you for joining us today. Also for going 15 minutes over. This has been a fantastic conversation. A Also, thank you for contributing so much to Bitcoin. Your content is fucking incredible. In case that wasn't clear to the people listening, check it out. BTC Sessions has amazing stuff out there. Some of the most cogent, well-organized, thoughtful tutorials on Bitcoin. Reminder, Bitcoin Amsterdam tickets are available today. You can use code BM. Nope. Lying. There is no.
Just buy the tickets. It's cheaper now than when the ticket prices go up.
There you go. There you go. My friends, we're going to call it a day. We will be back tomorrow with more incredible content. Join us. Subscribe, like, all that nonsense. Tomorrow we have Steve Barber of Upstream Data, incredible miner, and then, of course, Jimmy Song. And we start the day off at the usual time with news and notes with me and Q and Chris. We'll see you tomorrow.